Hello there, and welcome to Tired Thinker, a quiet space where busy minds slow down and big ideas unfold at their own pace. Tonight, we're exploring something close to so many of us: how to study well. Not just to pass a test, but to truly get ahead, to learn in a way that puts you in the top 1%, while everyone else is stuck doing the same old thing. Most people study in ways that feel productive, but don't actually work. They reread notes, highlight pages, or cram the night before an exam. It feels safe, but it leads to stress, burnout, and forgetting almost everything later. The truth is, learning can be calmer, smarter, and far more effective if you understand how to work with your brain instead of against it. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Maybe you're curled up late at night with a cup of tea, or squeezing in a quiet moment between long study sessions. Whatever your corner of the world looks like right now, take a second to notice how you feel in this moment. It's a little funny, isn't it? A video about studying, and here we are, scattered across time zones, all learning together, each of us trying to make sense of the same challenge in our own way. If this calm, thoughtful approach to learning resonates with you, or if you just need a place to pause and think deeply after a long day, I'd be grateful if you gave this video a like or gently subscribed. It helps this small, sleepy channel reach others who might need a softer, saner way to grow too. Now, let's begin. Imagine you are standing at the start of a long road. You know you want to reach a certain place, but you cannot see it yet. You only know it is out there somewhere. If you start walking without a clear idea of where you are headed, you will likely wander in circles or take paths that lead nowhere. This is what happens when you set out to achieve something without setting clear goals. A clear goal is like a map. It shows you where you are now, where you want to go, and how you can tell when you have arrived. Without that map, you are guessing, and guessing wastes time and energy. To set a clear goal, start by defining what success looks like in a way you can measure. Saying you want to get healthier sounds good, but it is vague. You cannot track it, and you will not know when you have succeeded. Instead, describe it in numbers and actions. For example, you might say, I want to lower my blood pressure to 120/80 within 6 months, or I will run 3 miles without stopping by December 1st. These statements are measurable. They leave no room for doubt about whether you reach them. Adding a time limit matters just as much as being specific. If you say, I will run 3 miles without stopping, but you do not say by when, you can keep pushing the effort to next week, next month, or even next year. A time limit creates urgency. It helps you focus. Imagine you are planning a road trip. You would not just say, I will drive to Chicago someday. You would say, I will drive to Chicago by Friday at noon. The time limit forces you to plan backward. If you must arrive by noon Friday, you know you need to leave by a certain time, and you can schedule stops along the way. Goals work the same way. Consider someone who wants to save money. If they simply say, I want to save more, they may toss a few dollars into savings now and then, but they will not build a steady habit. A clear goal would be, I will save $5,000 by June 30th. That number gives them something to aim for, and the date keeps them on track. They can break it into smaller steps, such as saving $200 each week. Each week becomes a checkpoint. If they fall behind 1 week, they know exactly how much they need to make up the next week. Clear goals also help you make better decisions. Imagine 2 coworkers who both want to improve their skills. One has a goal of get better at public speaking. The other has a goal of give one 10-minute presentation at the team meeting every month for the next 6 months. The first person may read articles, watch videos, and think about speaking, but without clear steps, they may not actually practice. The second person knows exactly what to do and when to do it. When a chance to present comes up, They will take it because it fits their plan. Setting clear goals is also about understanding what matters to you. If you chase a goal just because someone else wants you to, you will lose motivation. Picture a student whose parents want them to become a doctor. The student's real dream is to be a teacher. If the student sets a goal of getting into medical school, they will work hard at first, but their heart will not be in it. They may reach the goal, but they will feel unhappy and trapped. A better approach is to set a goal that aligns with their own values, such as, I will complete my teaching degree by the end of next year and apply for 3 positions by March. This goal reflects what they truly want, which makes them more likely to stay committed. Sometimes, life throws unexpected changes at you, and your goals must adjust. Imagine you planned to run a marathon, but you get injured halfway through your training. If you cling to the original goal, you may hurt yourself further or feel defeated. Instead, you could set a new goal. I will walk 5 miles 3 times a week until my injury heals, and then I will aim for a half marathon. The key is to stay flexible while keeping a measurable target. Another common mistake is setting too many goals at once. If you try to save money, run a marathon, learn a language, and write a book all at the same time, you will spread yourself too thin. Think of it like juggling. 1 or 2 balls are manageable. 10 balls will all drop. Choose 1 or 2 main goals to focus on. Once you achieve them, you can add new ones. Let's go back to the savings example. Suppose you have a goal of saving $5,000 by June 30th. Along the way, you face decisions like whether to eat out or cook at home, buy new clothes or use what you have, or take an expensive vacation. Without a clear goal, you might act on impulse and spend the money. With the goal in place, you can ask yourself, will this choice help me reach my $5,000 target by June 30th? If the answer is no, you can make a smarter decision. The goal acts like a filter. When you track your progress, you build momentum. Each time you hit a checkpoint, you see proof that your work is paying off. This creates a cycle of motivation. A runner who can see their distance increase each week will feel encouraged to keep going. A student who watches their grades improve after regular study sessions will stay motivated to continue. Progress tracking does not have to be fancy. A simple notebook, calendar, or phone app can work. The important thing is to make it visible so you cannot ignore it. Goals also help you communicate with others. Suppose you tell a friend, I want to get in shape. They may not know how to support you. If you say, I am training to run a 5K by October 1st, and I will run 3 times a week, your friend can cheer you on, join you for a run, or remind you to stick to your plan. Clear goals make it easier for others to help you because they understand exactly what you are doing and why. There will be days when you feel tired or unmotivated. On those days, your goal serves as a reminder of why you started. Think of a person saving for a down payment on a house. When tempted to splurge on something expensive, they can look at their goal and picture the home they want. That vision can give them the strength to say no in the moment so they can say yes to their bigger dream later. In the end, setting clear goals is not about perfection. It is about direction. A well-defined goal tells you what to do today, what to aim for tomorrow, and how to measure progress along the way. It keeps you focused when distractions arise and helps you make decisions that move you forward. Like a map on a long journey, it guides you step by step until you arrive exactly where you plan to be. Imagine you are learning to play the guitar. On the first day, your fingers hurt, the strings buzz, and every chord sounds wrong. You feel clumsy, and frustration builds fast. If you believe you are either born talented or not, you will likely quit. You might tell yourself, I'm just not musical, and put the guitar away for good. But if you believe skills grow through effort and practice, you will keep trying. You will see those mistakes not as proof you lack talent, but as signs you are learning. This shift in thinking is what it means to have a growth mindset. A growth mindset starts with the idea that abilities are not fixed. People often think intelligence, creativity, or strength are traits you either have or do not have. That belief creates limits. If you assume you were born bad at math, you will avoid math problems and your skills will never improve. Over time, your actions make the belief true. With a growth mindset, you understand that effort changes the brain and practice builds skill. You might not be great at math today, but you know you can get better if you work at it. This perspective opens doors instead of closing them. Consider a child learning to read. At first, the words blur together. They sound out letters slowly and mix up simple words. If the child hears, "You're just not a good reader," they may stop trying. Reading will feel like a mountain too high to climb. If instead they hear, "You haven't mastered this yet, but you can," they will keep practicing. Each small success builds confidence. The challenge becomes a sign of progress rather than a wall blocking their path. The difference lies in how they frame the experience. Challenges often trigger fear. Think of a person who just started a new job. They face new tasks and feel pressure to perform well. If they view every mistake as failure, they will try to hide errors or avoid hard assignments. Over time, they will learn less and fall behind. Now picture the same person with a growth mindset. They see each tough task as a chance to build skill. When they make a mistake, they ask questions and seek feedback. They might say to their manager, "I didn't get this right the first time, but now I know how to fix it." That response turns failure into learning. Feedback plays a big role in this mindset. Many people fear criticism because it feels like a judgment of who they are. With a growth mindset, feedback becomes information, not a personal attack. A basketball player who misses a shot could think, "I'm terrible at this," and give up. Or they could think, "My form was off. I need to adjust my grip and practice more." The first thought stops growth. The second thought drives action. Imagine a manager working with two employees. One sees criticism as proof they are bad at their job. The other sees it as a tool to improve. When the manager points out an error, the first employee shuts down, avoids eye contact, and feels defeated. The second employee takes notes, asks for examples, and tries again. Over time, the second employee will improve much faster. This shows why mindset affects results in real workplaces. A growth mindset also helps with long-term goals. Consider someone training for a marathon. Early in the process, they might struggle to run even a mile. Their legs ache and their lungs burn. If they believe they simply lack endurance, they will stop running. If they see each run as a step toward growth, they will track progress and keep going. One day, running 3 miles will feel easy. Later, 10 miles will feel possible. What once seemed impossible becomes normal because they stayed focused on growth. This mindset does not mean ignoring limits. A person who is 5 feet tall may never dunk a basketball in a professional game, but they can still improve their jump, their defense, and their teamwork. The focus shifts from comparing to others to comparing to past versions of yourself. If you run a mile today in 10 minutes and next month in 9, you have grown. That is what matters. Failure often brings the clearest lessons. Think of a scientist running experiments. Most experiments do not work the first time. If the scientist quit after each failure, no discoveries would happen. Instead, they analyze what went wrong, adjust their methods, and try again. Thomas Edison tested thousands of designs before creating a working light bulb. When asked about his failures, he said he found thousands of ways that did not work. That attitude reflects a growth mindset. The setback becomes part of the process. You can see this in everyday life too. Imagine you bake a cake for the first time and it collapses in the middle. With a fixed mindset, you might say, "I'm a terrible baker," and never bake again. With a growth mindset, you would read what went wrong, maybe adjust the oven temperature, and try again next week. Over time, your cakes would improve. The first failure would become a step towards success. Language shapes mindset. Words like yet and not yet keep doors open. If a student says, "I can't solve this problem," they feel stuck. If they say, "I can't solve this problem yet," they acknowledge progress is possible. That small shift changes how the brain reacts. Instead of giving up, the student keeps working. Imagine a workplace where leaders model this thinking. When a project goes wrong, the manager gathers the team and says, "This didn't work out yet. Let's review what we learned and try a new approach." That message encourages risk-taking and innovation. If instead the manager blames people and punishes mistakes, the team will avoid challenges. They will play it safe to avoid criticism. Over time, growth stops. You can practice a growth mindset by reflecting on past challenges. Think of a time when you faced something hard and eventually improved. Maybe you learned to ride a bike, speak a new language, or give a speech. At first, you stumbled. With practice, you got better. Remembering that process helps you trust that you can grow in other areas too. This mindset also applies to relationships. In a fixed mindset, you might think conflicts mean the relationship is broken. In a growth mindset, you see disagreements as chances to understand each other better. Instead of avoiding tough conversations, you work through them and strengthen the bond. Consider two friends who have a falling out. One believes if we fight, it means we are no longer friends. The other believes this fight is a chance to understand each other. The second friend reaches out, listens, and explains their feelings. The relationship recovers because one person saw the conflict as an opportunity. Every challenge holds the potential to teach something. When you face a difficult task, pause and ask yourself, what can I learn here? Maybe you gain a skill, or maybe you gain patience. Even setbacks carry lessons if you look for them. Over time, this habit changes how you see the world. Obstacles stop feeling like dead ends. They start feeling like detours that lead to new growth. A growth mindset is not about endless positivity or pretending problems do not exist. It is about facing reality and choosing to see effort as worthwhile. The next time you hit a wall, remember that the wall is not permanent. It is a signal that you are learning. Each step you take to climb over it builds strength for the next challenge. Imagine sitting at your desk late at night, surrounded by open books and scattered notes. You feel tired and your eyes keep drifting to the clock. The thought of closing the book and walking away creeps in. In moments like this, motivation fades fast. You start to question why you are even studying in the first place. This is when having a study mission statement matters most. It is a written reminder of your reason for doing the work. When you see it on paper, it becomes harder to forget, even on the hardest days. A study mission statement gives direction. Without one, you risk studying on autopilot. You may read chapters, memorize facts, and complete assignments, but without a clear purpose, your effort feels hollow. Think of it like driving without a destination. You keep the car moving, but you do not know where you are headed or why. When you define your mission, you set a destination. You know what you are working toward. And each hour you spend studying moves you closer to it. Start by asking yourself why you are studying. Go beyond surface answers. If you say, "I'm studying to pass this test," dig deeper. Passing the test is a short-term goal, not a true mission. Maybe the test is part of getting a certification that will help you start a career. Maybe the career will help you earn a stable income to support yourself or your family. Maybe it will give you the chance to work in a field you care about. Each layer brings you closer to the core reason you are putting in the effort. Imagine a nursing student who feels overwhelmed during exam season. On the surface, she studies to pass her classes. But when she looks deeper, she realizes her real reason is to become a skilled nurse who can help people in critical moments. Her mission might sound like this: I study so I can care for patients with skill and compassion, and to create a stable future for my family. This statement ties her daily grind to something bigger. When she feels stressed, she can read her mission and remember that every late-night study session serves a meaningful purpose. Your mission statement should be simple and specific. If you write a vague line like, "I study to be successful," it will not carry much weight. Success means different things at different times, and it can fade into empty words. A stronger statement connects to your values and goals. Consider a computer science student who loves solving problems. His statement might be, "I study to master coding so I can build tools that make people's lives easier." It is short, but it tells him exactly why he opens his laptop each day. Once you write your statement, keep it visible. Put it on a sticky note near your desk, or write it on the first page of your notebook. Some people even make it their phone background so they see it often. The key is to place it where you cannot ignore it. When motivation drops, reading your statement can bring focus back. It works like a compass, pointing you in the right direction when you start to drift. Imagine two students preparing for the same exam. One studies without a mission statement. He forces himself to review material each night. But as the week goes on, his energy fades. By test day, he feels burned out. The other student has a mission statement that says, "I study to become a teacher who inspires children to love learning." When she feels tired, she thinks about the classroom she hopes to lead one day. That vision fuels her to keep going. Both students put in hours, but the second student has a reason that sustains her effort. Your mission statement can also guide decisions. Suppose you are invited to a party the night before a big exam. Without a mission, you might decide on impulse and regret it later. With a mission, you can ask, "Will this choice help me move toward my goal?" If the answer is no, the decision becomes clearer. The statement acts as a filter, making it easier to stay aligned with your priorities. It also helps during setbacks. No one succeeds without facing challenges. You might fail a test, miss a deadline, or struggle with a concept. In those moments, quitting can feel tempting. A clear mission reminds you why you started. Think of a law student who fails a major exam. Without a mission, he might think, "I'm not cut out for this," and drop out. With a mission like, "I study to fight for justice and give a voice to those who are unheard," he can see the failure as a temporary obstacle, not the end of the road. His purpose gives him the strength to try again. When writing your mission, be honest. Avoid writing what you think others want to hear. A mission built on someone else's expectations will not motivate you when times get tough. For instance, if your parents want you to study business, but your passion lies in environmental science, do not write a mission about business just to please them. Instead, focus on what matters to you. Your mission might be, "I study to protect natural resources and help create a sustainable future." Even if others do not fully understand, staying true to yourself will keep you committed. Consider updating your statement over time. Your goals and values may shift as you grow. A high school student might start with, "I study to earn good grades and get into college." Later, in college, that same student might change it to, "I study to gain the knowledge and skills needed to design safe, efficient buildings." The core idea stays the same, using study to reach a meaningful goal, but the wording evolves as their path becomes clearer. You can also add details that make your mission more vivid. Imagine a medical student who writes, "I study so I can one day comfort a patient in pain and know exactly how to help them heal." This specific image gives her a picture to hold in her mind. When she feels tired, she can visualize herself in that future moment. Using the knowledge she is gaining now, that picture becomes fuel. Some people like to pair their mission statement with a small ritual. Before each study session, they might read their statement aloud or take a deep breath while looking at it. This simple act signals to the brain that it is time to focus. Over time, it becomes a habit, linking the mission to the act of studying. Imagine a student preparing for a final exam in chemistry. The material feels endless, and his motivation dips. Before he begins, he reads his statement. "I study to understand how the world works at its smallest level, so I can develop medicines that save lives." Those words shift his mindset. The formulas on the page stop feeling like random facts. They become tools for a larger purpose. That connection keeps him going, even when the work is hard. A study mission statement is a personal tool. It does not need to be perfect or polished. It just needs to capture your true reason for learning. Writing it forces you to slow down and think about why you are putting in the effort. Keeping it close gives you a steady source of motivation, especially when you face challenges or doubts. Each time you read it, you reconnect with your deeper purpose, and that connection makes it easier to keep moving forward. Imagine you are sitting down to study for an important exam. You have your books open, notes ready, and a clear plan in mind. 10 minutes in, your phone buzzes with a message. You check it, reply, and try to get back to work. A few minutes later, you hear an email notification. Then someone knocks on your door to ask a quick question. By the time you return to your books, you have forgotten what you were focused on. What should have been an hour of study has turned into scattered minutes of half effort. This is why deep work matters. Deep work is when you give your full attention to one demanding task without distraction. It is not about working longer, but about working with intensity and purpose. To get deep work done, you need to set aside time and space for it. Treat it like an important appointment you cannot miss. If you only study when you feel like it or when you happen to have free time, other things will always get in the way. Imagine a student who says, "I'll study whenever I find a moment." They might manage to fit in a few minutes here and there, but they never reach full focus. Their progress stays slow and they feel frustrated. Another student blocks 2 hours every evening for uninterrupted study. During that time, they silence their phone, close extra tabs on their computer, and let others know they are not available. By the end of the week, they have covered more material and understood it more deeply. When you schedule deep work, be realistic about how much time you can handle. Most people cannot focus at full strength for long stretches right away. If you are new to deep work, start with 30 to 45 minutes. As your focus improves, extend the sessions to 90 minutes or 2 hours. Think of it like lifting weights. You would not begin with the heaviest barbell in the gym. You would build strength gradually. Deep work follows the same pattern. Location matters as much as timing. Your brain learns to associate certain places with certain activities. If you always study in the same quiet spot, you will train your mind to enter focus mode when you sit there. Choose a space where you can control noise and interruptions. A library, a study room, or even a corner of your home can work if you set clear boundaries. Imagine someone who tries to study at a kitchen table while family members are cooking, talking, and moving around. Even with the best intentions, they will lose focus. Moving to a quieter location creates a signal that this is study time. Before you begin a session, gather everything you need. This prevents you from breaking focus later. If you sit down without a plan and realize halfway through that you need another book or a calculator, you will interrupt your flow. A simple preparation checklist helps. For example, if you are working on a math assignment, make sure you have your textbook, notebook, pencils, calculator, and water nearby. Once you start, you should not need to get up until the session ends. Distractions are the enemy of deep work. The most common distraction is your phone. Even a quick glance at a message can break your concentration and take minutes to recover. The best strategy is to silence notifications and place the phone out of reach or in another room. If you need your phone for study purposes, such as looking up information, use it only for that task and avoid other apps. Similarly, on a computer, close all tabs that are not related to the work at hand. Social media, email, and unrelated websites can wait until the session is over. Imagine two students studying side by side. One keeps checking their phone whenever it lights up. The other has their phone in a drawer and does not see or hear it. At the end of an hour, the second student has been in deep concentration the entire time. The first student has spent the same hour but with their focus broken into small pieces. The difference in understanding and retention between them will be significant. Deep work is most effective when you have a clear goal for each session. Going in without a specific plan leads to wandering thoughts and wasted time. Instead of saying, "I'll study chemistry for 2 hours," define what success looks like. You might say, "I will complete practice problems on chemical bonding and review Chapter 4 notes." This clarity gives your brain a target and helps you stay on track. Take short breaks between sessions to recharge. The human brain can only maintain intense focus for so long before performance drops. After a deep work block, stand up, stretch, get a drink of water, or take a short walk. This rest period allows your mind to reset so you can return with full strength. Avoid turning the break into a distraction trap. Scrolling through social media or watching videos can pull you into another time sink. Instead, do something simple and refreshing that does not steal your attention. Consistency matters. Deep work becomes easier when it is part of your routine. Imagine a student who studies deeply at the same time every day. Over time, their brain begins to expect that focused period, making it easier to settle in. In contrast, a student who studies at random times struggles to get into the right mindset because their brain does not have a pattern to follow. Regularity turns focus into a habit rather than a struggle. Consider a scenario where you have a major exam in 2 weeks. If you rely on last-minute cramming, you will likely feel stressed and overwhelmed. Even if you spend long hours studying the day before, your brain cannot absorb everything at once. If instead you schedule daily deep work sessions leading up to the exam, you can cover material gradually and thoroughly. By test day, you will feel prepared and calm because you have built understanding step by step. Deep work also strengthens memory. When you study with full concentration, you encode information more deeply in your brain. Imagine trying to memorize a poem while also watching television. You might repeat the words many times, but little will stick. Now imagine sitting in a quiet room, reading each line carefully and reciting it aloud with no interruptions. That information will stay with you much longer because your brain was fully engaged. You can track your deep work sessions to see progress over time. A simple calendar or notebook works well. Each day, mark whether you completed your planned session and how focused you felt. Seeing a record of your effort builds motivation. It also helps you notice patterns. You might discover that you focus best in the morning, or that certain environments lead to better results. With this knowledge, you can refine your approach. Others may not understand why you need uninterrupted time. Friends might want to chat, or family members might assume you are free to help with tasks whenever you are home. Clear communication solves this problem. Explain that during certain hours, you are not available because you are working deeply. A closed door, a sign, or a simple statement like, "I'll be free to talk after my study session," sets a boundary. Most people will respect it once they understand your schedule. Imagine a student named Alex preparing for a difficult physics exam. He plans to study 4 hours each day. Instead of trying to do it all at once, he breaks it into 2 deep work blocks of 2 hours each. In the morning, he tackles complex problem-solving exercises. In the afternoon, he reviews formulas and concepts. During each block, he removes distractions, sets a timer, and works with full focus. By the end of the week, he has not only studied for many hours, but also learned at a deeper level because his attention stayed sharp. Deep work is a skill that improves with practice. The more you do it, the easier it becomes to reach that state of intense focus. With time, you will notice that you accomplish more in less time and retain information longer. You will also feel a greater sense of control over your studies because you know how to create the conditions for meaningful progress. Picture yourself sitting in a quiet room with your study materials spread out in front of you. You take a deep breath and close your eyes. In your mind, you see yourself reading the material with full focus, understanding every concept and recalling details with ease. You imagine walking into the exam room, feeling calm and confident. You see yourself sitting down, reading the first question, and knowing exactly how to answer it. This mental exercise is visualization, and it has a powerful effect on your performance. When you visualize success, you train your brain to believe that success is possible, and this belief drives your actions. Your brain cannot fully tell the difference between a vividly imagined scenario and a real one. Athletes use this fact all the time. A basketball player might close their eyes and imagine sinking free throws over and over. When they step onto the court, their body responds as if it has already practiced those shots. The same principle works with studying. When you visualize yourself mastering the material, you prepare your mind to perform well when it matters most. Consider a student preparing for a tough biology exam. Each night before bed, she spends 5 minutes imagining herself reviewing her notes with complete focus. She sees herself explaining the concepts out loud and answering questions with confidence. She even imagines walking into the classroom, opening the test, and calmly working through each section. By the time the actual exam arrives, the setting feels familiar to her because she has already experienced it many times in her mind. This lowers anxiety and sharpens performance. Visualization works best when it is detailed. The more specific you make the mental image, the more powerful it becomes. If you simply think, "I will do well," the image is vague and weak. Instead, imagine each step clearly. See the room where you study, the pages of your textbook, and the way your pen moves across the paper as you take notes. Imagine the exact moment you recall an answer during the test. Engage all your senses. Picture what you see, hear, and feel. The more vivid the image, the stronger the effect on your brain. Imagine two students using different approaches. The first only tells himself, "I hope I pass this exam." He studies, but doubts fill his mind. He pictures himself failing or forgetting key facts. On test day, his nerves spike, and he freezes when he sees the first question. The second student spends time each day visualizing success. She sees herself staying calm, remembering what she studied, and finishing the exam with confidence. When she sits down to take the test, her body and mind follow the pattern she has rehearsed. Even if she feels nervous at first, she can return to the mental image she built and settle into focus. Visualization does not replace actual study. You cannot imagine your way to success without putting in the work. Think of visualization as a supplement, like stretching before a workout. Stretching alone will not make you strong, but it prepares your muscles to perform. Similarly, visualization prepares your mind to use the knowledge you have gained. When combined with regular study, it creates a powerful foundation. You can use visualization to break through self-doubt. Many people struggle not because they lack ability, but because they do not believe they can succeed. This belief shapes behavior. A student who thinks, "I'll never understand this," will approach study sessions with half-hearted effort. Their lack of focus will lead to poor results, which then reinforce the belief. Visualization interrupts this cycle. When you see yourself mastering the material, you start to believe it is possible. That belief changes how you act in the real world. You study with more focus and persistence, which leads to better outcomes. Consider a language learner who feels stuck. She keeps forgetting vocabulary words and starts to think she will never become fluent. Each morning, she takes 2 minutes to visualize herself speaking with a native speaker, using the new words correctly and flowing through a conversation with ease. At first, the image feels unrealistic. Over time, her mind accepts it as a possibility. She begins to study with renewed energy. When she practices speaking in real life, her confidence is higher because she has already experienced success in her imagination. Visualization can also help you stay motivated during long-term projects. studying often involves delayed rewards. You might work for weeks or months before seeing results. This delay can make it hard to stay focused. By visualizing the outcome, you bring the future reward into the present. Imagine a medical student facing years of challenging coursework. Some days, the workload feels endless. Each night, he visualizes himself as a doctor helping patients. He sees himself using the knowledge he is building now to save lives later. This mental picture reminds him why his current effort matters. The timing of visualization matters. Many people find it helpful to visualize right before a study session. This primes the mind for focus. For example, before opening your book, close your eyes and picture yourself studying with complete attention. Imagine understanding each concept and remembering it later. When you open your eyes and begin, your mind is already in a state of readiness. Visualization also works well before sleep. As you drift off, your brain continues to process the images you created, reinforcing the message of success. Imagine a student named Mark who struggles with test anxiety. The night before a big exam, he often lies awake worrying. This time, he decides to try visualization. He closes his eyes and imagines walking calmly into the test room. He feels his breath steady and his shoulders relax. He sees himself reading each question, recalling the answers, and finishing with time to spare. By focusing on this mental rehearsal instead of fear, he falls asleep more easily. The next day, when he arrives for the test, the setting feels familiar and his anxiety is lower. Visualization can even be used during a study session to reinforce learning. Suppose you are working on solving math problems. After completing a problem correctly, close your eyes and picture yourself doing the steps again in your mind. Imagine writing out each step and arriving at the right answer. This mental practice strengthens neural pathways in the brain, making it easier to repeat the process later. Athletes use similar techniques to refine complex movements. You can apply the same principle to academic skills. The key to effective visualization is consistency. A single session will not make a big difference. Over time, repeated practice builds strength. Think of it like watering a plant. One splash of water will not keep the plant alive. Steady care over many days helps it grow. Set aside a few minutes each day for visualization. The practice will become easier and more natural as you repeat it. Distractions can weaken the effect. Try to visualize in a quiet place where you will not be interrupted. Close your eyes and breathe slowly to calm your mind. If your thoughts wander, gently return to the image of success. With practice, you will be able to hold the image longer and with more clarity. Visualization is a skill you can refine. In the beginning, your mental pictures may feel fuzzy or unrealistic. That is normal. As you continue, the images will become sharper and more vivid. Over time, you will notice changes in how you approach studying. You will sit down with more confidence, focus more deeply, and recover more quickly from setbacks. The simple act of seeing yourself succeed can shift your mindset and, in turn, your results. Imagine you are preparing for a major exam. You have weeks of lectures, several textbooks, and endless notes to review. The sheer volume of material feels overwhelming. You sit down to study, but you don't know where to start. So you read page after page, hoping to cover everything. As the exam gets closer, you realize you have spent hours on details that may never even appear on the test. This is a common trap. The Pareto Principle, often called the 80-20 rule, offers a way out. It suggests that about 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. When applied to studying, this means that a small portion of the material will have the biggest impact on your performance. Consider a history class with hundreds of pages of reading. Not every fact in the book is equally important. Key events, causes, and themes will likely make up most of the test questions, while minor details appear rarely, if at all. If you can identify the 20% of topics that your teacher emphasizes, you can focus most of your time there and achieve strong results. This doesn't mean you ignore everything else, but it means you avoid wasting hours on low-value material. Imagine two students. The first spends 10 hours reading every single page of the assigned book. The second spends 5 hours identifying the main themes and studying them deeply, then uses the remaining 5 hours to review supporting details. On exam day, the second student performs better because they mastered the most important material instead of spreading their effort thinly. By applying the 80-20 rule, they gained more from the same total study time. The challenge is knowing which 20% to focus on. There are clues if you pay attention. Teachers often repeat key points during lectures. They may highlight certain topics in study guides or assign extra practice questions on them. Past exams are another valuable source. By reviewing old tests, you can see which concepts appear frequently. If a specific formula shows up year after year, you can be confident it's worth mastering. Take a math course as an example. The textbook might cover 20 different formulas, but the professor consistently uses 5 of them in class and on practice problems. Those 5 are likely part of the vital 20%. If you know them inside and out, you can solve most of the exam questions. The remaining 15 formulas may still matter, but they require less time. Spending hours memorizing rarely used formulas would not give you the same return on effort. You can also use the 80-20 rule during a single study session. Imagine you have a 3-hour block to prepare for a biology test. Instead of dividing your time equally among 10 chapters, you could spend the first 2 hours on the 2 or 3 chapters that carry the most weight. During the final hour, you skim the remaining chapters to get a general understanding. This strategy ensures that you go into the exam with strong knowledge of the topics most likely to appear. The 80-20 rule also applies to practice problems. Suppose you are studying for a chemistry exam and have a set of 100 problems to solve. If you attempt to do them all, you may rush and learn very little. Instead, focus on the 20 most challenging problems that represent core concepts. Work through them carefully, understanding each step. Once you feel confident with these key problems, you can move on to others if time allows. This approach builds a strong foundation and prevents burnout. Imagine a language learner preparing for a conversation exam. There are thousands of words in the language, but only a small number are used in most everyday conversations. By identifying and mastering this core vocabulary, the learner can speak effectively much sooner. Spending hours memorizing rare words may feel productive, but it doesn't give the same payoff. By focusing on the essential 20%, the learner reaches practical fluency faster. The 80-20 rule can also help you manage stress. When you try to study everything equally, you feel constant pressure because there is never enough time. By narrowing your focus to what matters most, you gain a sense of control. You know you are spending your energy wisely, which builds confidence. Even if you don't master every single detail, you can still perform well because you understand the core material thoroughly. Let's say you have a final exam in economics. You review your class notes and notice that most lectures centered on 5 major theories. Your professor also mentioned these theories repeatedly during discussions. You decide to spend most of your study time mastering these concepts, including definitions, applications, and examples. During the exam, 4 out of 5 questions are based on those very theories. Because you focused on the high-impact material, you are able to answer them with ease. The remaining question is on a less familiar topic, but you can still make an educated attempt because you studied the overall framework. Sometimes students resist this approach because they feel guilty about not covering every detail. They fear that if they skip something, it will show up on the exam. This fear is natural, but it often leads to poor results. Trying to know everything usually means knowing nothing well. It's better to know the most important material deeply than to have a shallow understanding of everything. Even if a rare detail appears on the test, its effect on your overall grade will be small compared to the weight of the core material. To apply the 80-20 rule, start by reviewing your syllabus and past exams to identify patterns. Look for recurring themes, common question types, and repeated instructions from your teacher. Then, plan your study schedule around these key areas. For example, if you discover that 3 chapters consistently account for half of the exam questions, allocate extra time to them. Use the remaining time for a quick overview of the other chapters. You can also track your own progress. After each study session, reflect on what you learned and how it connects to your main goals. If you realize you spent hours on minor points without improving your understanding, adjust your focus. Over time, you will get better at identifying which topics give the highest return on effort. Consider a scenario with 2 friends studying for a psychology exam. One spends her evenings reading every page of the textbook. She highlights paragraphs and takes long notes, but she struggles to remember key concepts. The other friend uses the 80-20 rule. He reviews past exams, listens carefully during class, and identifies the 5 main theories that always appear on tests. He studies these theories deeply, creating diagrams and practice questions. On exam day, he answers most questions confidently because they match the material he focused on. His preparation was efficient and effective, while his friend felt drained and unprepared despite working just as hard. The 80-20 rule does not mean ignoring effort. It means being strategic. Hard work still matters, but it must be directed at the right tasks. By identifying and prioritizing the 20% of material that drives 80% of your results, you make each study session count. This approach helps you study smarter, reduce wasted time, and achieve better outcomes with the same or even less effort. Over time, you develop a sharper sense of what truly matters, and that skill will serve you well beyond the classroom. Imagine you have a huge exam in 3 weeks. The exam covers multiple chapters, hundreds of pages of reading, and a set of practice problems. At first, the task feels impossible. You sit down to study, but don't know where to start, so you flip through your notes aimlessly. Days pass, and your stress grows because you feel like you are working hard without making progress. This happens when you treat a big goal as one giant task instead of breaking it into smaller, clear steps. A planner helps you avoid this problem by organizing your study time into weekly and daily actions. When you plan, you turn a vague goal into specific tasks you can complete each day. Instead of thinking, "I need to study for this exam," you decide what you will do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. This makes the work manageable. It also gives you a sense of control. You can see how each small task fits into the bigger picture. When you track your progress, you build momentum and reduce anxiety because you know exactly where you stand. Start by looking at the big picture. Write down the date of the exam and count how many days you have until then. Suppose you have 21 days. Next, figure out everything you need to cover. Let's say the exam has 6 chapters, 2 sets of practice problems, and a review session with your teacher. You now have a clear list of what must get done. Divide this list across the available time. For instance, you might study 2 chapters per week for the first 2 weeks, leaving the final week for review and practice. This weekly outline gives structure to your study plan. It's like drawing a map before you take a trip. You know where you need to go and how long it should take to get there. Without this step, you risk rushing through material at the last minute or spending too much time on one topic while neglecting others. Once you have a weekly plan, break it down into daily tasks. This is where a planner becomes essential. Each evening, write down what you will focus on the next day. Be specific. Instead of writing, "Study chemistry," write, "Review chapter 3 notes and complete 5 practice problems." This level of detail helps you start quickly and stay focused. When you check off each task, you get a small sense of accomplishment that keeps you motivated. Consider a student named Sarah who has a history exam in 2 weeks. She knows the test will cover 4 chapters. She creates a weekly plan, chapters 1 and 2 in week 1, chapters 3 and 4 in week 2. Then she breaks week 1 into daily tasks. On Monday, she reads chapter 1 and highlights key points. On Tuesday, she reviews her highlights and creates flashcards. On Wednesday, she quizzes herself on chapter 1 and begins reading chapter 2. By Sunday, she has a solid understanding of the first half of the material. In week 2, she repeats the process for the remaining chapters, leaving the final 2 days for full review. Because she planned carefully, she never feels rushed or overwhelmed. Unexpected events can disrupt even the best plan. You might get sick, have extra homework, or face other demands on your time. This is why flexibility matters. When you plan weekly and daily, you can adjust without losing track. If you miss a task on Monday, you move it to Tuesday. The structure stays intact because you always know what needs to be done next. Without a plan, you might panic and give up, wasting valuable time. Planning also helps you balance study with other responsibilities. If you try to cram all your work into random moments, you may neglect sleep, exercise, or social time. Over time, this imbalance hurts your focus and energy. When you use a planner, you can see your schedule clearly. You can set aside time for breaks and rest while still making steady progress. This makes studying more sustainable. Imagine 2 students with the same exam date. The first has no plan. She studies whenever she feels like it, jumping between topics with no clear direction. Some days, she studies for hours. Other days, not at all. As the exam approaches, she realizes she has only reviewed half the material. The night before the test, she stays up late trying to cram everything in, but her brain is tired and overwhelmed. The second student plans carefully from the start. Each day, she completes a small, specific task. By the final week, she has already reviewed everything once and can spend her energy on practice and refinement. On test day, she feels calm and prepared. The difference comes down to planning. A good planner shows both the big picture and the daily details. Weekly pages help you track progress across longer stretches of time. Daily pages give you space to write tasks, deadlines, and notes. Some people prefer paper planners because writing by hand reinforces memory. Others use digital tools that send reminders and allow quick changes. The format matters less than the habit of planning consistently. The act of writing tasks down also clears mental space. When you keep everything in your head, you feel scattered. You might worry about forgetting something important, which adds to stress. When you transfer tasks to a planner, your mind relaxes because you know nothing will be lost. You can focus fully on the current task instead of juggling multiple thoughts. Consider how this works in practice. A student named Mark has 3 major assignments due next month: a research paper, a group project, and a final exam. Without a plan, these deadlines blur together and he feels overwhelmed. He opens his planner and writes each due date on the calendar. Then he breaks each project into steps. For the research paper, he lists tasks like choose topic, find sources, write outline, and draft introduction. He spreads these tasks over the coming weeks. Now, instead of staring at a looming deadline, he has clear actions to take each day. Planning also reveals how much time you truly have. Many students underestimate how long tasks will take. They think they can read a chapter in 30 minutes, only to spend 2 hours on it. When you track tasks daily, you learn to estimate more accurately. This skill helps you make realistic plans in the future. Another benefit of planning is accountability. When you see tasks written down, they become commitments. If you skip a task, you face it again the next day. Over time, this accountability builds discipline. It is easy to ignore vague intentions like study more. It is harder to ignore a specific line in your planner that says, complete 5 practice problems. Imagine a student named Laura who struggles with procrastination. She often tells herself she will study later, but later never comes. She starts using a planner, writing down small tasks each day. At first, she resists, but over time, checking off completed tasks becomes satisfying. She begins to trust the process. By exam week, she has built a steady habit of progress instead of last-minute panic. Planning weekly and daily requires a few minutes of effort, but it saves hours of wasted time. It turns big, stressful goals into clear, achievable steps. With a planner, you know exactly what to do each day and how it fits into your overall timeline. This structure keeps you focused, steady, and ready for whatever challenges come your way. Imagine you sit down to study, and the first thing you do is read a chapter in your textbook. After 10 minutes, you switch to solving practice problems. Then you open a different subject and start reviewing flashcards. A few minutes later, you return to the textbook because you remembered something you missed. Each time you switch tasks, your mind has to adjust. This constant shifting uses energy and slows you down. It feels like you are working hard, but in reality, a lot of your effort is lost in the transition between activities. This is called a switching cost, and it drains both time and focus. Batching similar tasks is a way to avoid this problem. Instead of jumping back and forth between different kinds of work, you group related activities together and complete them in one focused block. This helps you stay in the same mental mode for longer, so you work more efficiently. It is like doing laundry. You would not wash one shirt, dry it, fold it, and then repeat the entire process for each piece of clothing. You would wash a whole load at once, then dry and fold it together. Studying works the same way. Consider a student preparing for a biology exam. She needs to read chapters, take notes, make flashcards, and quiz herself. If she tries to do all of these tasks in random order, she wastes energy shifting gears. Instead, she can batch her work. First, she spends a full hour reading and taking notes. Then she sets aside the next block of time to make flashcards from those notes. Finally, she dedicates another session to using the flashcards for review. By grouping similar tasks, she keeps her focus steady and moves through the material smoothly. The mind works best when it stays in a single mode. Reading, problem solving, and memorizing each require different kinds of thinking. When you jump between them, you force your brain to reset over and over. Imagine driving a car in heavy traffic, constantly stopping and starting. You use more fuel and move slower than if you stayed at a steady speed. Batching tasks allows your brain to cruise instead of sputtering forward in fits and starts. Take a math class as another example. You might need to review formulas, watch tutorial videos, and solve practice problems. If you start by watching a video, pause to solve one problem, go back to the video, and then open your notes, you break your concentration. Instead, you could spend one session just reviewing formulas and watching videos to understand concepts. In the next session, you focus entirely on solving problems. By keeping similar tasks together, you give each type of thinking the time it needs to deepen. Batching also works across subjects. Many students study multiple subjects in one sitting, moving between them as they go. While this might seem like multitasking, actually scatters attention. If you have 2 hours to study, it is better to spend the first hour fully focused on one subject and the second hour on another. Switching between subjects too often creates confusion and makes it harder to retain information. Imagine a student named Alex with 3 upcoming exams: history, chemistry, and literature. Without a plan, he spends 15 minutes on history, 10 minutes on chemistry, then jumps to literature for 20 minutes before going back to history. At the end of 2 hours, he feels exhausted but has little to show for it. If Alex batches his study time, he could spend 1 full hour on history, then take a short break and devote the next hour to chemistry. Literature can wait until the next session. This method gives each subject the focus it deserves and reduces wasted energy. Another benefit of batching is that it simplifies preparation. When you know you will spend an entire block of time on a single type of task, you can gather everything you need beforehand. For instance, if you plan to spend an hour making flashcards, you can collect your notes, pens, and cards at the start. You will not need to interrupt yourself halfway through to hunt for missing materials. This keeps your session smooth and uninterrupted. Consider how batching applies to reviewing notes. If you sit down each day and review a random section of notes, you will feel like you are constantly starting over. Instead, set aside one day to organize all your notes, another day to highlight key points, and another to quiz yourself on the material. This clear structure makes progress easier to track. Batching also helps with digital distractions. Many students try to study while checking their phones or emails. These constant interruptions act like mini task switches. Even a quick glance at a message can break your concentration. A better approach is to batch your communication. Decide on specific times to check messages, such as before and after your study session, and keep your phone out of reach while you work. This way, your mind stays fully on the task at hand. Imagine two friends studying together. One keeps her phone next to her and answers texts as they come in. The other puts her phone in another room and checks it only during breaks. At the end of an hour, the second friend has stayed in deep focus the entire time. The first friend has worked in fragments, constantly switching between studying and texting. The difference in what they learn is clear. Batching can be applied even to small tasks like organizing supplies or printing materials. Instead of handling these tasks whenever they pop up, group them into a single block of time. For example, you might spend 15 minutes on Sunday gathering all the resources you need for the week ahead. This prevents constant interruptions during your actual study sessions. Consider a scenario where you need to write a research paper. Writing a paper involves several steps: researching, outlining, drafting, and editing. If you jump between these steps randomly, the paper will take much longer to complete. Instead, batch your work. Spend one session gathering research sources, another session creating a detailed outline, a separate session writing the draft, and a final session editing. Each phase builds on the previous one without forcing your brain to keep switching modes. The benefits of batching extend beyond efficiency. It also reduces stress. When you know exactly what type of work you are doing in a given block of time, you feel less scattered. Instead of worrying about 10 different things at once, you can focus completely on the task in front of you. This clear separation makes studying feel calmer and more organized. Imagine a student named Mia who struggles with anxiety during exam season. She feels overwhelmed because there are so many things to do: reading, memorizing, solving problems, and writing practice essays. By batching her tasks, she gains control. Monday is for reading and note-taking. Tuesday is for flashcards and memorization. Wednesday is for practice essays. Each day has a single focus, so she no longer feels pulled in every direction. Her stress decreases and her performance improves. Batching does not mean you ignore variety. You can still study different subjects or skills in one day, but you separate them into clear, uninterrupted blocks. This balance keeps your brain engaged without overwhelming it. For example, you might spend the morning on writing tasks, the afternoon on problem solving, and the evening on memorization. Each block has its own purpose, and you move between them with intention rather than chaos. Over time, batching similar tasks becomes a habit. You will start to notice patterns in your energy and focus. You might discover that you do your best reading in the morning and problem solving in the evening. With this knowledge, you can schedule your study blocks to match your natural rhythm. This alignment makes your work even more efficient. The simple act of grouping related tasks protects your attention from unnecessary strain. It turns scattered effort into focused progress. By batching your study activities, you move through your work with steady concentration, making each session count and each hour spent more productive. Imagine sitting down to study with a vague plan to work on assignments. You open your textbook and glance at the calendar. The due date for your paper is still 2 weeks away. You tell yourself there's plenty of time, so you check your phone, scroll through messages, and get lost in other tasks. Hours pass and the paper remains untouched. The next day, the same thing happens. Before you realize it, the deadline is 2 days away, and you are overwhelmed. You rush to finish. Your stress levels skyrocket, and the final result is far from your best work. This is the trap of procrastination, and it happens because there is no real urgency until the very last moment. Setting strict deadlines helps you avoid this cycle. A strict deadline creates pressure that pushes you to take action now instead of later. Without it, you rely on willpower alone, which fades quickly when the task feels difficult or boring. A deadline acts like a timer counting down in the background. It reminds you that time is limited and that progress must happen today, not someday. Even self-imposed deadlines can be effective if you treat them as seriously as deadlines set by a teacher or boss. Consider a student named Laura, who has a 10-page research paper due in 3 weeks. If she waits until the night before to start, she will stay up late writing, and the paper will likely be sloppy and rushed. Instead, she sets strict deadlines for each stage of the process. She gives herself 2 days to choose a topic, 4 days to gather sources, 3 days to outline, 5 days to write the draft, and 2 days to revise. Each mini deadline moves her closer to the final goal. By breaking the project into steps with fixed dates, she creates urgency throughout the process rather than only at the very end. Deadlines also prevent tasks from expanding endlessly. Without a clear time limit, a simple assignment can stretch to fill an entire afternoon. You might read and reread the same chapter, making small adjustments without finishing anything. This is called Parkinson's Law. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion. If you give yourself 1 hour to review a chapter, you will focus sharply and finish within that hour. If you give yourself the whole day, you will probably waste much of it. Strict deadlines keep you efficient by forcing you to work with focus and speed. Imagine 2 friends studying for the same exam. The first friend plans to study all weekend. She starts Saturday morning but takes frequent breaks, checks her phone often, and drifts between topics. By Sunday night, she has put in many hours but feels unprepared because her study time lacked structure. The second friend sets a strict schedule: 2 hours for reviewing chapters 1 and 2, a 30-minute break, then 2 hours for chapters 3 and 4. She repeats this schedule on Sunday with practice problems. Because each block has a clear start and end time, she stays focused and completes more in less total time. Deadlines are especially powerful when they involve some form of accountability. It's easy to ignore a private deadline because no one knows if you miss it. If you share your deadline with someone else, you add external pressure. For instance, you might tell a friend, "I'll send you my draft by Thursday night." Now, if you fail to meet the deadline, you not only disappoint yourself, but also someone else. This added layer of accountability makes you more likely to follow through. You can also use public accountability. Imagine joining a study group where everyone commits to finishing a set of tasks by the next meeting. Knowing others will check your progress gives you a strong reason to stay on track. Some students even post updates on social media, sharing their study goals and reporting when they meet them. The key is to create a situation where missing a deadline carries real consequences. Strict deadlines work best when they are realistic. A deadline that is too aggressive can backfire, leading to frustration or burnout. If you have a 10-page paper, setting a deadline to write it all in one day may not be practical. Instead, set challenging but achievable targets. For example, aim to write 3 pages per day over 3 days. This pace creates urgency without overwhelming you. Imagine a student named David preparing for final exams. He has 3 subjects to study, each requiring about 10 hours of review. If he simply says, "I'll study for 30 hours this week," the goal feels vague and intimidating. Instead, he sets strict deadlines: 2 hours of math each morning, 2 hours of science in the afternoon, and 2 hours of history in the evening. By the end of each day, he knows exactly what he has accomplished. At the end of the week, he has completed 30 hours of focused study without feeling lost or rushed. Deadlines also help you prioritize tasks. When everything feels urgent, it's easy to waste time on low-value activities. Suppose you have a big exam next week and a small homework assignment due tomorrow. If you don't set clear deadlines, you might spend hours perfecting the homework while ignoring the exam preparation. By assigning fixed times to each task, you ensure that important work gets the attention it deserves. Consider how strict deadlines influence decision-making. Imagine you are studying when a friend invites you to hang out. If you have a strict deadline, you can say, "I need to finish this by 7 p.m., but I'll be free after that." Without a deadline, you might say yes immediately, assuming you can make up the time later. Often, that later never comes. Deadlines make it easier to protect your study time and set boundaries with others. To make deadlines stick, treat them as non-negotiable. Many people set deadlines for themselves but bend them at the first sign of discomfort. They think, "I'll just push this to tomorrow." Soon, tomorrow becomes next week, and the cycle of procrastination continues. When you create a deadline, act as if it were set by someone you cannot disappoint. This mindset builds discipline over time. Visual cues can reinforce deadlines. Use a calendar or planner to mark important dates in bold. Cross off each day as you complete it. Watching the days pass creates a physical reminder that time is moving forward. Some people use countdown timers, setting them for 30 or 60 minutes to create a sense of urgency during study sessions. When the timer runs out, they take a short break before starting again. Imagine a student named Mia using this method. She sets a timer for 50 minutes and commits to working without interruption until it rings. Knowing the clock is ticking keeps her focused. After a 10-minute break, she starts another session. Over the course of an afternoon, she completes several focused blocks of study, each guided by the timer. The strict boundaries prevent her from drifting into distractions or losing track of time. Strict deadlines can also help with long-term motivation. Large goals often feel distant and abstract. If you say, "I want to get an A in this class," that goal might not inspire action today. Breaking it into smaller deadlines brings the future closer. For example, finish reading chapter 5 by Tuesday feels immediate and doable. Meeting these small deadlines builds momentum toward the larger goal. Deadlines create a feedback loop. Each time you meet one, you gain a sense of accomplishment. That success builds confidence and makes you more likely to meet the next deadline. Over time, you develop a habit of finishing tasks on schedule. This habit reduces stress because you no longer rely on last-minute cramming or late-night rushes. Instead, you work steadily, knowing exactly what must be done and when. When you set strict deadlines, you take control of your time. You replace vague intentions with concrete actions. You give yourself the urgency needed to overcome procrastination and the structure needed to stay consistent. Even when the work is challenging, the clear boundaries push you to keep moving forward, step by step, until the goal is complete. Imagine you have been studying hard for a week. You sat through long study sessions, completed assignments, and went through chapters in your textbook. When the week ends, you feel tired but unsure of what you actually accomplished. You remember moments when you felt productive and moments when you got stuck, but it's all mixed together in your mind. Without a clear understanding of what worked and what didn't, you start the next week repeating the same habits, even the ones that held you back. This is why reviewing your weekly progress matters. Taking time to reflect helps you see where your effort paid off and where changes are needed. When you review your progress, you step back from the daily grind and look at the bigger picture. It's like checking a map on a long trip. If you never stop to look, you might keep walking in circles without realizing it. Reflection helps you confirm that you are moving toward your goals rather than just staying busy. Consider a student named Sarah preparing for a final exam. At the start of the week, she set a plan to cover 3 chapters, complete a set of practice problems, and review her notes. By Sunday, she has done a lot of work but feels overwhelmed. She decides to sit down for 30 minutes and think about her week. She looks at her planner and asks herself a few key questions. Did she complete the tasks she planned? Which chapters felt easier, and which ones gave her trouble? When did she feel most focused, and when did she get distracted? By answering these questions honestly, Sarah learns that she spent too much time on the first chapter because she kept rereading the same sections instead of practicing questions. She also realizes she focused best in the mornings, while her evening study sessions were less effective. These insights shape how she plans the next week. Reflection does not require fancy tools. A notebook or simple digital document is enough. The goal is to capture what actually happened, not what you wish had happened. Be specific. Instead of writing, "studied a lot," write "reviewed chapters 1 and 2 on Monday, completed 10 practice problems on Wednesday, and reviewed flashcards on Friday." Specific details give you something to analyze. Imagine a student named Alex who struggles with procrastination. He ends the week feeling like he wasted time but can't explain why. When he starts tracking his study habits, he discovers that he spends almost an hour each session checking his phone and browsing online before settling down to work. By reviewing his notes at the end of the week, he sees exactly how much time he lost. This realization motivates him to put his phone in another room during study sessions. Without reviewing his progress, he would have kept repeating the same unproductive pattern. Reviewing weekly progress also helps you measure growth. Some tasks, like reading a chapter or completing an assignment, have clear endpoints. Others, like improving problem-solving skills or building vocabulary, happen gradually. If you only look at daily results, you might miss signs of improvement. By comparing week to week, you can see trends. Maybe you solved 5 practice problems correctly last week and 7 this week. That small gain shows your effort is paying off. Consider how athletes track performance. A runner might record their times after each practice. One run doesn't reveal much, but over several weeks, patterns appear. The same idea applies to studying. When you review your weekly progress, you notice which strategies lead to better outcomes. You might find that reviewing notes right after class helps you retain information longer, or that morning study sessions are consistently more productive than late-night ones. Sometimes, reflection reveals that your goals were unrealistic. It's common to overestimate what you can do in a week. You might plan to read 5 chapters, complete 3 assignments, and write a draft of a paper, only to finish half of it. Without reviewing your progress, you might blame yourself for being lazy or disorganized. Reflection shows the truth. You set a plan that was too ambitious. Next week, you can adjust by setting more realistic goals. Imagine a student named Mia who is balancing school with a part-time job. She plans to study 4 hours every evening, but by the end of the week, she has only managed 2 hours most nights. When she reviews her schedule, she realizes she comes home exhausted and needs time to rest before studying. With this insight, she shifts her study sessions to mornings on her days off and short bursts during lunch breaks. By adjusting her strategy, she creates a plan that fits her real life instead of an idealized version of it. Reflection is not about judgment. The goal is not to criticize yourself for mistakes, but to learn from them. Everyone has off days. Maybe you skipped a study session because you felt sick or had an unexpected commitment. That's normal. The important thing is to understand why it happened and how to prevent it next time. If you skipped studying because your schedule was unclear, you can fix that by planning more carefully. If you skipped because you were tired, you might focus on improving sleep or setting earlier study times. Reviewing weekly progress can also reveal which study methods are most effective for you. For example, you might try summarizing notes one week and using flashcards the next. By comparing results, you can see which method helped you retain information better. Over time, you build a personal toolkit of strategies that work best for your learning style. Consider a scenario with two friends preparing for the same exam. Both put in 10 hours of study time each week. One spends most of that time passively reading and highlighting. The other spends half the time solving practice problems and half the time testing herself with flashcards. When they review their weekly progress, the second friend notices she remembers more and feels more confident. She decides to keep using active study techniques, while the first friend realizes she needs to change her approach. Reflection works best when it becomes a routine. Choose a consistent time each week to review your progress. Sunday evening often works well because it closes one week and sets up the next. Keep the review session short, around 30 minutes. Look at what you planned, what you completed, and how you felt during the process. Then make a simple plan for the upcoming week based on what you learned. Imagine a student named David who adopts this habit. Every Sunday night, he sits down with his planner and reviews the past week. At first it feels tedious, but after a month, he notices a difference. He sees patterns he never noticed before, like how he tends to lose focus after 2 hours of study, or how group sessions are more effective for certain subjects. With each review, he fine-tunes his strategy. By the end of the semester, he has built a study routine that is both efficient and sustainable. Sometimes reviewing your week will reveal positive surprises. You might discover that you accomplished more than you thought. This boost of confidence can keep you motivated, especially during long, difficult projects. Other times, the review will highlight weak spots that need attention. Either way, you gain valuable information. Reflection also helps you stay connected to your bigger goals. It's easy to get lost in daily tasks and forget why you are studying in the first place. When you review your progress, you can remind yourself of your long-term purpose, whether it's passing a class, earning a degree, or preparing for a career. This perspective makes the hard work feel meaningful. By reviewing weekly progress, you turn studying into a process of continuous improvement. You stop relying on guesswork and start making informed decisions. Each week becomes a chance to adjust, refine, and move closer to your goals. Through regular reflection, you build a study routine that grows stronger with time, 1 week at a time. Imagine you're studying a difficult topic like photosynthesis. You read the textbook, highlight important passages, and memorize key terms like chlorophyll, carbon dioxide, and glucose. When you test yourself with flashcards, you get most of the answers right. It feels like you understand the material. Then someone asks you to explain how plants turn sunlight into energy, and you freeze. You stumble through a vague answer, mixing up steps and forgetting key details. This moment shows a common problem. Knowing words is not the same as truly understanding a concept. The Feynman Technique helps you close that gap by forcing you to explain ideas in simple, clear language. The technique is named after Richard Feynman, a physicist known for making complex topics easy to understand. His approach was simple. If you can't explain something in plain words, you don't fully understand it yet. Many students mistake memorization for mastery. They think being able to recite definitions means they have learned the material. In reality, true understanding means you can break the concept down and teach it to someone else as if they are hearing it for the first time. The process begins with choosing a concept you want to learn. Write the name of the concept at the top of a blank sheet of paper. Below it, explain the idea as if you were teaching a younger student or someone completely unfamiliar with the subject. Use clear, everyday language instead of technical terms. If you must use jargon, define it in simple words first. The act of writing forces you to slow down and think carefully. For example, imagine you are studying the concept of gravity. You might write, "Gravity is the force that pulls objects toward each other. It keeps planets in orbit around the sun and makes things fall to the ground on Earth." This explanation is simple and direct. If you catch yourself writing, gravity is caused by the curvature of space-time as described by general relativity, you are probably repeating a textbook phrase without true understanding. Your goal is not to sound smart, but to make the idea clear. As you write, you will likely reach a point where you struggle. Maybe you know the words but can't explain why something happens. This moment signals a gap in your knowledge. Instead of skipping over it, mark the section and return to your notes or textbook. Study it again, then rewrite the explanation in your own words. The struggle itself is valuable because it shows you exactly where to focus your effort. Without this step, you might keep rereading familiar material while avoiding the parts you don't understand. Consider a student named Alex, learning about the water cycle. At first, he writes, "Water evaporates, forms clouds, and then falls as rain." When he tries to explain why evaporation happens, he hesitates. He realizes he doesn't know what causes water to change from liquid to gas. This gap would have gone unnoticed if he hadn't tried to explain it out loud. Alex goes back to his textbook, learns about heat energy and molecular movement, and then adds, "Evaporation happens when heat gives water molecules enough energy to break free from the liquid and become gas." Now, his explanation is complete and clear. Once you have a full explanation, the next step is to refine it. Look for places where you used complicated words or long sentences. Simplify them. Imagine you are explaining the concept to a friend who knows nothing about the subject. If your explanation still sounds confusing, keep revising until it flows naturally. This process not only improves your understanding, but also helps you remember the material because you are actively working with it instead of passively reading. Teaching others is a powerful part of this method. Find someone willing to listen, like a classmate, friend, or family member. Explain the concept to them using your simple version. Pay attention to their reactions. If they look confused, that's a sign your explanation needs more work. Even if no one is available, you can teach yourself out loud. Speaking forces you to organize your thoughts and reveals weak points in your understanding. Imagine a medical student named Sarah studying the process of how the heart pumps blood. She practices by explaining it to her younger brother. She says, "The heart is like a pump with 4 rooms. Blood flows in, gets pushed to the lungs to pick up oxygen, then comes back and gets pushed out to the rest of the body." When her brother asks why the blood needs oxygen, Sarah hesitates. She realizes she never fully understood the role of oxygen in energy production. This moment sends her back to her notes. After learning more about cellular respiration, she can return with a clearer, more complete explanation. The Feynman Technique also helps you avoid false confidence. Sometimes you feel like you know a topic because you can follow along while someone else explains it. This is like watching someone play an instrument and thinking you could do it too. When you try to play, you realize it's harder than it looks. By forcing yourself to explain the concept from scratch, you test whether you can perform without prompts or cues. This method works for all subjects, from science and math to literature and history. In math, for example, you might think you understand how to solve an equation because you can follow the steps in class. When you sit down to explain why each step works, you may find gaps. You might say, "We move the number to the other side of the equation," but then struggle to explain why that rule exists. This signals that you need to review the underlying principles rather than just memorizing procedures. Consider a history example. A student studying World War I might write, "The war started because of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand." This is accurate, but incomplete. When asked to explain why the assassination led to a global conflict, the student might get stuck. This shows they need to dig deeper into alliances, nationalism, and military buildup. By filling in these gaps, they build a more comprehensive understanding of the causes. The Feynman technique also encourages active learning. Passive learning happens when you read or listen without engaging deeply. It feels safe because you don't have to test yourself. Active learning forces you to interact with the material, challenge your assumptions, and confront what you don't know. Writing and teaching are active tasks. They make you think critically and help solidify memories in a way that passive review cannot. To make this a habit, set aside time each week to apply the technique to challenging topics. Choose one concept, write out your explanation, identify gaps, and refine it. Even 10 or 15 minutes can reveal weaknesses you might otherwise miss. Over time, you will notice that you not only remember material better, but also feel more confident applying it to new problems. Imagine a student named David using this method for his physics class. Each Sunday, he selects one difficult concept, like momentum or energy transfer. He spends time writing a plain language explanation, then reads it aloud to himself. When he stumbles, he marks the section and studies it further. By the end of the semester, he has a collection of clear explanations that serve as powerful study tools. His classmates, who rely only on reading and highlighting, struggle to recall details during exams, while David can explain concepts easily and apply them to complex questions. The Feynman Technique works because it mirrors how we naturally learn through teaching and storytelling. When you can teach a concept clearly, you prove to yourself that you truly understand it. When you can't, you know exactly where to focus your effort. This process transforms studying from a routine of memorization into a deeper, more meaningful exploration of ideas. Imagine studying a set of flashcards for a test. You go through the cards several times the night before and feel confident you know the material. The next day, you take the test and do well. A week later, someone asks you about the same information, and you realize most of it has slipped away. This is a common experience because the brain forgets information over time unless it is revisited. Spaced repetition is a method that helps you fight this natural forgetting process by reviewing material at carefully planned intervals. Instead of cramming all at once, you spread your study sessions out so that you return to the same information just before you are about to forget it. The idea comes from how memory works. When you first learn something, it sits in your short-term memory. Without reinforcement, it fades quickly. Each time you review the material, you strengthen the memory and push it further into long-term storage. The key is to wait the right amount of time between reviews. If you review too soon, you waste time because the memory is still fresh. If you wait too long, you forget completely and must relearn it from scratch. Spaced repetition aims to find the balance, reviewing just before the memory starts to weaken. Consider a student named Sarah studying vocabulary for a foreign language. On the first day, she learns 10 new words. She reviews them again the next day, then waits 3 days before the next review, then a week, then 2 weeks. Each time, the gap between reviews grows longer. By the end of the month, she remembers most of the words without having to relearn them. If Sarah had crammed by repeating the words over and over in one sitting, she might have remembered them for a day or two, but the knowledge would have faded quickly. Spaced repetition works well because it uses something called the spacing effect. This effect shows that information sticks better when you review it over time rather than all at once. It is like exercising a muscle. If you work out intensely for one day and then stop for a month, you will lose strength. If you work out consistently with rest periods in between, you build lasting strength. Your brain works the same way. Each review session strengthens the memory, and the spacing between sessions gives your brain time to consolidate what you learned. Imagine two students preparing for the same history exam. The first student studies for 6 hours straight the night before the test. The second student studies for 1 hour a day over 6 days, reviewing old material while adding new topics each time. On exam day, both students perform well. 2 weeks later, only the second student can still recall most of the information. The first student has already forgotten most of it because their knowledge never moved beyond short-term memory. The spaced repetition method gave the second student lasting recall. One way to use spaced repetition is with flashcards. Write a question on one side and the answer on the other. Start by reviewing all the cards. When you get a card right, move it to a pile you will review later. When you get a card wrong, keep it in the current pile for immediate review. Over time, the cards you know well move to piles with longer gaps between reviews, while the cards you struggle with stay in the shorter review cycle. This method ensures you spend more time on the material that challenges you without wasting energy on what you already know. There are digital tools that make this process easier. Apps like Anki or Quizlet use algorithms to track how well you know each card and schedule reviews automatically. For example, if you recall a card easily, the app might not show it again for several days. If you hesitate or answer incorrectly, it brings the card back sooner. This way, you always study at the point where the review is most effective. Spaced repetition is useful for subjects beyond vocabulary. In math, you can review problem types at increasing intervals. For example, you might solve a set of algebra problems today, review them again in 2 days, then a week later, and again a month later. Each session reinforces the concepts and techniques until they become automatic. In science, you can review key concepts, diagrams, or formulas the same way. Even in literature or history, you can use it to remember dates, characters, or themes. Consider a student named Mark preparing for a chemistry final. At the start of the semester, he learns about atomic structure. Instead of moving on and never looking back, he schedules reviews. In the first week, he revisits atomic structure every 2 days. In the second week, he reviews it once. By the third week, he only needs a quick glance to refresh his memory. By the end of the semester, he still remembers the material because he reinforced it regularly. Meanwhile, his classmate who only studied the topic at the beginning of the semester must relearn it completely during finals week. Spaced repetition also helps you manage time more efficiently. When you cram, you cover everything in a short period, but you must relearn it later, which doubles your workload. With spaced repetition, each review session is short because you are only reinforcing what you already know. Over time, this saves hours of study while giving you stronger results. It also reduces stress because you never face the pressure of last-minute cramming. Imagine a student who has 3 months to prepare for a standardized test without a plan. They might spend the last 2 weeks in a panic, studying for hours each day. With spaced repetition, they can spread the workload evenly. They might review vocabulary on Mondays, math concepts on Wednesdays, and reading strategies on Fridays. Each week, they revisit older material while adding new topics. By test day, they feel calm because they have been reviewing consistently. The intervals between reviews depend on how difficult the material is and how well you remember it. A common pattern might be 1 day after learning, then 3 days later, then a week, then 2 weeks, and finally a month. If you struggle with a particular concept, you shorten the interval. If you recall it easily, you lengthen the interval. Over time, most material can move to longer gaps, like quarterly or even yearly reviews, to keep it fresh. Spaced repetition also works well when combined with active recall. Active recall means testing yourself rather than just rereading notes. When you use flashcards or practice questions, you force your brain to retrieve information, which strengthens memory more than passive review. Combining active recall with spaced repetition creates a powerful learning system. Consider a language learner named Mia. She wants to master 500 new words in 3 months. Each day, she learns 10 new words and reviews older ones using an app that schedules them with spaced repetition. When she sees a word, she doesn't just read it, she says it out loud and uses it in a sentence. At first, the reviews are frequent. As she improves, the app shows each word less often. By the end of 3 months, she can recall nearly all 500 words with confidence because she learned and reviewed them using this system. Sometimes, spaced repetition reveals which material you need to prioritize. If you consistently forget certain flashcards or problem types, you know exactly where to focus your energy. This prevents wasted time on concepts you already understand. It also helps you track progress. Seeing how long you can go between reviews without forgetting gives you a clear sense of improvement. Spaced repetition is not only for academic subjects. You can use it for skills like playing an instrument, learning a sport, or even memorizing a speech. Any skill that requires long-term retention benefits from gradual, spaced practice. Each session builds on the last, and the growing intervals give your brain time to strengthen connections. Imagine a student preparing for a public speaking competition. On the first day, he practices the full speech several times. The next day, he practices again, then waits 3 days before the next session. As the competition approaches, he reviews it once a week. By the time he steps on stage, the speech feels natural because he has practiced it repeatedly over time. Spaced repetition changes the way you approach studying. Instead of cramming and forgetting, you build a steady rhythm of learning and reinforcement. With each carefully timed review, you strengthen your memory and move closer to true mastery of the material. Imagine a student studying math for an upcoming exam. She spends an entire hour solving only one type of problem, such as equations with fractions. She starts to feel confident because she gets many questions right in a row. When she moves on to a different problem type the next day, she struggles. The confidence she felt before fades because she realizes she only learned to solve that one pattern, not to understand how to approach problems in general. This is a common issue with block practice, where you focus on one topic at a time. It creates a false sense of mastery. Interleaved practice helps solve this problem by mixing different topics or problem types within a single study session. Interleaving forces your brain to switch between ideas. At first, it feels harder because you cannot rely on repetition to guide you. Instead of solving 10 identical problems in a row, you might solve one equation problem, then a geometry question, followed by a word problem, and so on. This method strengthens learning because it mirrors real-life situations, where you must figure out which approach to use rather than being told ahead of time. Consider a basketball player in training. If he spends an hour shooting only free throws, he may get very good at them, but that does not prepare him for a game where shots come from different angles and distances. A better practice session would mix free throws, layups, three-pointers, and defensive moves. In the same way, interleaved practice prepares you for the variety you will face on an exam or in practical use of a skill. Imagine 2 students preparing for a science test. The first student studies chapter by chapter in order. She spends Monday on photosynthesis, Tuesday on cellular respiration, and Wednesday on genetics. The second student uses interleaving. Each day, she reviews a mix of questions from all 3 topics. At first, the second student feels slower and less confident because she cannot predict what type of question is coming next. However, on test day, she performs better because she has practiced switching between topics and applying the right strategy under pressure. The effectiveness of interleaving comes from a concept called discrimination. When you mix different problem types, you force yourself to identify which method to use, rather than simply applying the same steps repeatedly. For instance, in math, you might see a problem and have to decide whether to use the quadratic formula, factoring, or substitution. This decision-making process deepens understanding and builds flexibility. Without interleaving, you may become skilled at following a pattern, but unprepared to recognize which pattern fits a new problem. Consider a student named Alex learning how to solve physics problems. If he spends an hour only on questions about velocity, he will get faster at those questions. The next day, he switches to problems about acceleration and repeats the cycle. When his teacher gives him a mixed set of questions, he freezes. He knows how to solve each type separately, but struggles to figure out which method applies. By practicing with a mix of velocity, acceleration, and force problems in one session, Alex learns to read each question carefully and choose the right approach. Interleaved practice also strengthens memory. When you switch between topics, your brain must work harder to recall information. This effort strengthens the connections in your memory, making the knowledge stick longer. Block practice feels easier because you stay on one topic. But this ease is misleading. It creates familiarity without durability. Interleaving feels harder in the moment, but it produces lasting learning. Imagine a language learner studying vocabulary. If she reviews only words about food for an entire session, she will remember them for a short time. When she tries to recall them in conversation a week later, many will be gone. If instead she mixes food words with vocabulary about travel, clothing, and emotions, her brain must work harder to keep track. This extra effort helps her recall the words more easily later because she practiced using them in varied contexts. One way to structure interleaved practice is to prepare a mixed set of study materials. In math, you might create a worksheet that combines different problem types instead of separating them by chapter. In science, you could make flashcards covering several topics and shuffle them before each session. Even in reading heavy subjects like history or literature, you can mix tasks by reading a passage, answering questions about causes and effects, then analyzing a character or theme. The goal is to prevent your brain from falling into a predictable rhythm. Imagine two friends preparing for a standardized test. The first friend studies one section at a time. All math on Monday, all reading on Tuesday, all writing on Wednesday. The second friend mixes practice questions from each section every day. On test day, the second friend is better prepared because the exam itself is mixed. She is used to switching between different types of thinking, while her friend feels drained by the constant transitions. Interleaving can feel frustrating at first. You might feel like you are making slower progress because you don't see quick improvement in any single area. This is normal. The struggle you experience means your brain is working harder, which leads to deeper learning. It's similar to lifting weights. If you only lift light weights, the exercise feels easy, but your muscles don't grow. If you lift heavier weights, the workout feels harder, but you build real strength. Consider how interleaving works in writing. If you spend an entire session only on grammar drills, you might get good at spotting grammar mistakes in that narrow context. When you write an essay, however, you must think about grammar, structure, and ideas at the same time. A better practice session might include writing a paragraph, revising it for grammar, and then analyzing another piece of writing for structure. This mix mirrors the demands of real writing tasks. Interleaving is especially useful when you need to apply knowledge flexibly. In fields like medicine, engineering, or law, professionals rarely face neatly separated problems. A doctor, for example, might see a patient with symptoms that could relate to several different conditions. By practicing with mixed case studies, medical students learn to diagnose based on subtle differences rather than memorizing one pattern at a time. Imagine a nursing student named Mia learning to assess patients. If she spends 1 week only studying respiratory cases and another week only studying cardiac cases, she might do well on quizzes but struggle in a real clinic. If instead she studies a mix of cases each day, she learns to identify which system is involved and respond appropriately. This practice prepares her for the unpredictability of real-world situations. You can combine interleaving with other study techniques for even better results. For example, you might use spaced repetition to schedule review sessions and interleave different topics within those sessions. This approach ensures you revisit material over time while also practicing switching between ideas. Consider a student named David preparing for a final exam in chemistry. Each study session, he reviews a mix of topics like chemical bonding, reactions, and thermodynamics. He spaces these sessions out over several weeks, gradually increasing the intervals between them. On exam day, he not only remembers the material, but also knows how to move between different types of problems smoothly. To start using interleaving, think about how your study sessions are currently structured. If you tend to focus on one topic for long stretches, experiment with mixing related topics together. At first, you might switch every 20 minutes. Over time, you can create practice sets that resemble the variety you will face in exams or real-world applications. The key to successful interleaving is balance. Too much switching can feel chaotic and prevent deep focus. Too little switching becomes block practice and loses the benefits. Aim for a mix that challenges you without overwhelming you. Pay attention to how you feel during and after sessions. If you feel mentally tired but able to recall information later, you are likely practicing at the right level of difficulty. Interleaved practice may not give the immediate satisfaction of mastering one type of problem in isolation. It works in a quieter way, building flexible knowledge that lasts. By mixing topics and problem types, you train your brain to recognize patterns, make decisions, and adapt to new challenges, the same skills you will need on exams and beyond. Imagine sitting at your desk with a textbook open in front of you. You read through a chapter carefully, highlighting key sentences and underlining important terms. When you reach the end, you feel confident because the material looks familiar. Later, when you try to recall what you studied, you find that much of it has slipped away. This happens because recognition is not the same as recall. When you reread notes or highlight text, you are recognizing information that is already in front of you. It feels like learning, but it does not test whether you can remember the information without help. Active recall solves this problem by forcing you to retrieve information from memory. It strengthens your understanding and makes it easier to remember later. Active recall is a simple but powerful method. Instead of passively reviewing, you close your notes and test yourself. This might mean answering questions out loud, writing down everything you know about a topic, or solving problems without looking at the solution. The act of pulling information out of your memory strengthens the neural pathways that store it. Each time you retrieve a fact, you make it easier to retrieve again in the future. Consider two students studying for the same exam. The first student spends 3 hours rereading chapters and highlighting sentences. The second student reads the material once, then closes the book and asks herself questions about what she just learned. When she gets stuck, she checks her notes, reviews the answer, and tries again later. On exam day, the second student performs better because she has been practicing the same skill the test requires, recalling information without cues. The first student, who relied on recognition, struggles because the exam does not give hints the way the textbook did. One effective way to use active recall is to write questions as you study. As you read a section, turn key points into questions. For example, if you are studying photosynthesis, you might write, "What are the main steps of photosynthesis?" or "Why is chlorophyll important?" Later, close your book and try to answer these questions from memory. If you can't, go back to the material, review briefly, then test yourself again. This method transforms passive reading into an interactive process. Flashcards are another useful tool for active recall. Write a question or term on one side and the answer on the other. Go through the cards without looking at the answers until you have tried to recall each one. When you get a card wrong, set it aside and review it more often. Digital apps like Anki or Quizlet can automate this process and even schedule reviews using spaced repetition. Imagine a student named Alex learning anatomy. He has hundreds of terms to memorize, from muscles to bones to organs. If he simply reads through a list of names, he may recognize them in the moment but forget them later. Instead, he creates flashcards with the name of a muscle on one side and its function on the other. Each night, he tests himself, saying the answers out loud before flipping the card. Over time, the names move from short-term memory to long-term recall. By exam day, Alex can retrieve the information without hesitation because he has practiced doing so repeatedly. Active recall also works for problem-solving subjects like math or physics. Many students read through solved examples and think they understand. When faced with a blank page, they freeze because they have never practiced doing the steps on their own. The better approach is to study an example, close the book, and try to solve a similar problem from scratch. If you get stuck, open the book, review the step you missed, and try again. This method builds independence and prepares you for exams where you must solve problems without guidance. Consider a student named Mia preparing for a chemistry test. She reads through sample problems on balancing chemical equations and feels confident because the solutions make sense. The next day, she tries to balance equations without looking at the answers and realizes she cannot remember the rules. She switches to active recall by covering the solutions and working through each problem on her own. When she checks her work, she notes where she went wrong and tries again. By the end of the week, she can solve equations without hesitation because she has trained her brain through repeated retrieval. Another form of active recall is writing summaries from memory. After studying a topic, close your notes and write down everything you can remember in your own words. Do not worry about perfect grammar or organization at first. The goal is to see what you truly know. When you finish, compare your summary to the original material. Any missing points show where you need to review. This exercise reveals gaps in understanding that passive reading often hides. Imagine a history student named David studying the causes of World War I. After reading his notes, he closes his notebook and writes a short essay explaining the events from memory. When he compares his essay to his notes, he realizes he forgot to mention the role of alliances. Now, he knows exactly where to focus his next review session. This process helps him build a complete and accurate understanding rather than a vague impression. Active recall feels harder than passive review, especially at first. You may struggle to remember details and feel frustrated when you get things wrong. This struggle is a good sign. It means your brain is working hard to retrieve information, which strengthens memory. Passive review feels easier because you are simply looking at familiar material, but it does not create lasting learning. Many students avoid active recall because it feels uncomfortable. They prefer to read, highlight, or watch videos because these activities feel productive without the risk of failure. However, real progress comes from testing yourself. Each time you recall something correctly, you reinforce that memory. Each time you recall it incorrectly, you learn exactly where to focus your study. Over time, the process becomes less stressful as your confidence grows. Imagine two friends studying for a biology exam. One spends hours rereading the textbook and highlighting key terms. The other uses active recall by testing herself with questions and flashcards. During their study sessions, the second friend makes many mistakes at first, while the first friend feels smooth and efficient. On exam day, the roles reverse. The first friend struggles to remember key details, while the second friend answers questions easily because she has been practicing recall all along. You can combine active recall with other techniques like spaced repetition for even better results. For example, you might create a set of flashcards and review them at increasing intervals over several weeks. Each review session forces you to recall the answers, strengthening the memory while also spacing it out for long-term retention. Active recall also helps with time management. When you test yourself, you quickly see which topics you know well and which ones need more work. This allows you to focus your energy where it matters most instead of spending equal time on everything. For instance, if you can recall 90% of the material in one chapter, but only 50% in another, you know to spend more time on the weaker chapter. Imagine a student preparing for a comprehensive final exam covering the entire semester. She creates a list of topics and tests herself on each one without looking at her notes. For the topics she answers correctly, she schedules only brief reviews. For the ones she struggles with, she sets aside extra study sessions. This targeted approach saves time and improves performance. Active recall can even be done without special tools. If you are walking to class, you can quiz yourself mentally by recalling definitions or processes. If you are studying with a friend, take turns asking each other questions. The key is to remove all supports and rely solely on your memory. This direct challenge is what makes the technique so effective. By making active recall a regular part of your study routine, you shift from passive familiarity to true mastery. Instead of merely recognizing information when you see it, you train yourself to retrieve it at will. This skill prepares you not only for exams, but also for real-world situations where you must rely on your knowledge without notes or textbooks to guide you. Imagine you spend 2 hours studying for a big exam. You read through your textbook, go over class notes, and solve a few practice problems. When you close your books, you feel like you have done good work. The next day, you try to remember what you studied and realize much of it is already slipping away. This happens because the brain forgets information quickly if it is not reinforced. One simple way to fight this forgetting is to write a short summary immediately after each study session. By summarizing what you just learned, you capture the key ideas while they are fresh and strengthen them in your memory. Summaries work because they force you to process information actively. When you read or listen, it is easy to fool yourself into thinking you understand. You might nod along or highlight text without truly absorbing it. Writing a summary is different. You have to decide what the main points are, explain them in your own words, and organize them into a clear structure. This requires deeper thinking. The act of writing also slows you down, giving your brain more time to connect ideas and store them in long-term memory. Imagine a student named Sarah studying biology. She spends an hour reading about cell structure. When she finishes, instead of closing her book and moving on, she takes 5 minutes to write a half-page summary. She includes the names of the main organelles, their functions, and how they work together. The next day, when she reviews her summary, the material comes back to her quickly because she already processed it once through writing. If she had skipped the summary, she would likely need to reread the entire chapter to remember the same information. The key to a good summary is clarity and brevity. A summary is not a copy of your notes or textbook. It is a condensed version that captures the essence of what you learned. Imagine trying to explain the topic to a friend who missed class. You would not recite every detail. You would focus on the most important ideas and express them in plain language. This is the same mindset you should use when writing a summary for yourself. Consider a student named Alex, who is studying the causes of World War I. His class notes cover pages of details, dates, and names. If he tries to include everything in his summary, it will become overwhelming and unhelpful. Instead, he focuses on the core causes: nationalism, alliances, militarism, and the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He writes 3 short paragraphs, each explaining one cause and how it contributed to the outbreak of war. Later, when he reviews for the exam, Alex can use this summary as a quick refresher. It saves him from wading through pages of dense notes. Summarizing right after a study session is especially powerful because of how memory works. There is a short window of time when new information is fragile but still vivid. Writing a summary during this window helps stabilize the memory before it fades. If you wait until the next day, you will forget details and spend extra time relearning them. Even a brief summary written immediately after studying can make a big difference in retention. Imagine two friends preparing for a chemistry exam. Both spend 2 hours studying chemical reactions. The first friend finishes and closes her notebook without writing anything down. The second friend spends an extra 10 minutes writing a summary of the key reaction types and examples. A week later, the second friend remembers much more because she reinforced the material at the right moment. The first friend has to start almost from scratch. Summaries also reveal gaps in understanding. When you try to explain a concept in your own words, you may realize you do not understand it as well as you thought. This is a valuable signal. It shows you where to focus your next study session. For example, a student writing a summary of photosynthesis might be able to list the steps, but struggle to explain why each step happens. This difficulty highlights a weak spot that needs more review. Without writing the summary, the weakness might stay hidden until the exam. Consider a student named Mia who is learning about probability in math class. She thinks she understands the material because she followed along in class and solved the practice problems. When she sits down to write a summary, she realizes she cannot clearly explain the difference between independent and dependent events. This discovery pushes her to revisit the topic and practice more problems. By the time of the test, she has closed the gap in her knowledge. Summaries can take different forms depending on the subject. For a reading-heavy subject like history or literature, you might write a few paragraphs explaining the main events or themes. For math or science, you might list key formulas and concepts, along with brief explanations. The format matters less than the process of thinking through what you learned and expressing it clearly. Imagine a student named David studying physics. After a session on Newton's laws, he writes a short summary like this. Newton's first law says an object will stay at rest or in motion unless acted on by a force. The second law links force, mass, and acceleration using the formula F equals ma. The third law says that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. This summary is only a few sentences, but it captures the essence of the lesson. When David reviews later, he can expand on each point without needing to reread the entire textbook. Writing summaries also helps you organize your study materials. Over time, you will build a collection of concise notes that cover the entire course. These summaries become a valuable resource when preparing for exams. Instead of flipping through a pile of messy notes, you can review your clear, focused summaries. This saves time and reduces stress during finals week. Consider two students at the end of the semester. One has a binder full of scattered notes, handouts, and highlighted textbook pages. The other has a folder of summaries written after each study session. When it's time to prepare for the final exam, the second student can review weeks of material in a few hours. The first student spends most of their time just trying to figure out what to study. Writing summaries also improves your ability to explain ideas to others. Teaching is one of the most effective ways to learn. When you write a summary, you are essentially teaching yourself. If you share your summaries with classmates, you can teach them too. Explaining concepts to someone else forces you to clarify your own thinking and identify any areas of confusion. Imagine a study group where each member writes summaries of different topics and then explains them to the group. One student summarizes the digestive system, another covers the circulatory system, and another reviews the nervous system. By teaching each other using their summaries, the group reinforces their own understanding while helping everyone else learn. Summaries do not have to be long or formal. Even a few sentences can be enough if they capture the main ideas. The important thing is to write them immediately after studying, while the information is still fresh. Over time, this habit becomes a natural part of your routine. Imagine finishing a study session and thinking, "I'll summarize later." Later often never comes. Other tasks get in the way. and by the time you return to the material, your memory has faded. By writing the summary right away, you lock in the learning and save yourself time in the future. The process of summarizing is both a review and a test. As you write, you must recall information without looking at your notes. This retrieval strengthens memory. When you check your summary against the original material, you can see what you got right and what you missed. This combination of recall and correction makes the learning stick. Imagine a student named Laura reviewing anatomy. She closes her textbook and writes a summary of the circulatory system from memory. When she compares it to her notes, she sees she forgot to mention how oxygenated and deoxygenated blood move through the heart. This feedback helps her correct her mistake and remember it better next time. By repeating this process after each session, Laura steadily improves her knowledge and confidence. Writing summaries is a simple but powerful way to make study sessions more effective. It turns passive reading into active learning, strengthens memory, reveals weak points, and creates a record of progress. Each summary is like a snapshot of your understanding at that moment, building a clear path toward mastery over time. Imagine sitting down to study for a long stretch of time. You open your textbook and promise yourself you will keep working until you finish the chapter or complete every problem set. At first, you focus well, but after a while, your mind begins to wander. You check your phone, stare out the window, or reread the same sentence several times without absorbing it. Hours pass, and you realize you have been sitting at your desk, but not really learning. This is a common problem when study sessions are too long and unstructured. The Pomodoro Technique helps solve this by breaking work into smaller, focused bursts with planned breaks. The method is simple. You choose a task and set a timer for a specific period, usually between 25 and 50 minutes. During that time, you work with full attention and avoid distractions. When the timer goes off, you stop, even if you are in the middle of a problem, and take a short break, usually 5 to 10 minutes. After the break, you start another work session. After several cycles, you take a longer break of 15 to 30 minutes. These timed intervals keep your mind fresh and prevent burnout. The name Pomodoro comes from a kitchen timer shaped like a tomato that the creator of the method used when he developed it. While the timer shape doesn't matter, the principle of strict timing does. Knowing you only have to focus for a limited period makes it easier to resist distractions. Instead of telling yourself to study for 3 hours straight, you commit to a single, focused session. When you know a break is coming soon, staying on task feels more manageable. Imagine a student named Sarah preparing for a biology exam. She feels overwhelmed by the amount of material she needs to cover. Instead of sitting down for an endless study session, she decides to try the Pomodoro Technique. She sets her timer for 25 minutes and chooses to focus only on cell structure during that time. She silences her phone and puts it out of reach. For 25 minutes, she reads, takes notes, and tests herself without interruption. When the timer rings, she stands up, stretches, and grabs a glass of water. After a 5-minute break, she sets the timer again and starts on the next topic, photosynthesis. By the end of 2 hours, Sarah has completed 4 focused sessions and feels accomplished instead of drained. These short cycles help prevent mental fatigue. When you work for too long without a break, your focus decreases and mistakes increase. A planned pause allows your brain to rest and reset. During the break, you can do something simple like walk around, drink water, or breathe deeply. The key is to step away from the work, not to get lost in social media or start a completely different task that might pull you away for too long. Consider another student, Alex, who struggles with procrastination. When he thinks about writing his research paper, he feels overwhelmed and avoids starting. Using the Pomodoro Technique, he tells himself he only has to write for 25 minutes. This small commitment feels manageable. Once he begins, he often finds himself gaining momentum and continuing past the first session. Even if he stops after 25 minutes, he has made progress. By repeating this process, Alex breaks a large, intimidating project into small, achievable steps. The technique also trains you to estimate time more accurately. At first, you might misjudge how long a task will take. For example, you may think reading a chapter will take 1 session, but it actually takes 2 or 3. By tracking how many sessions different tasks require, you learn to plan better. This skill is valuable when scheduling study time before exams or deadlines. Imagine a student named Mia preparing for finals in 3 different subjects. She decides to dedicate 6 Pomodoro sessions per day to studying. By tracking her progress, she notices that math problems take longer than reading history chapters. She adjusts her schedule by assigning more sessions to math and fewer to history. Over time, she builds a realistic plan that matches the demands of each subject. The Pomodoro Technique works well because it combines focus and rest in a balanced way. Many students try to power through without breaks, believing that non-stop work equals productivity. In reality, the brain can only maintain deep focus for so long before performance drops. Planned breaks keep energy levels steady and prevent the frustration that comes with mental exhaustion. Consider the difference between 2 friends studying for the same exam. One studies for 3 hours straight, growing more tired and distracted as time passes. The other uses 6 Pomodoro sessions of 25 minutes each, with short breaks in between. The second friend finishes feeling clear-headed and remembers more of what she studied, while the first feels drained and foggy. The difference is not just in the total hours, but in how the time was managed. The technique can be adapted to different needs. Some people prefer the classic 25-minute session with 5-minute breaks. Others find that 50 minutes of focus, followed by a 10-minute break, works better, especially for tasks that require deep concentration. The exact timing is less important than maintaining the cycle of focused work and regular rest. For example, David is writing a complex essay. He finds that 25 minutes feels too short to get into a flow, so he uses 45-minute sessions with 10-minute breaks. This longer interval suits his writing process while still protecting him from burnout. The Pomodoro Technique is flexible enough to fit different personalities and study styles. It is important to protect each session from interruptions. Before you start the timer, gather everything you need: books, notes, pens, and water. Turn off notifications and let others know you are not available. If a distracting thought pops into your head during the session, jot it down on a piece of paper and return to it during your break. This prevents small distractions from derailing your focus. Imagine a scenario where Laura is studying for a physics exam. In the past, she would get up repeatedly to grab supplies, check messages, or respond to questions from her roommate. Her sessions felt scattered and unproductive. When she switched to using Pomodoro sessions, she prepared in advance and set clear boundaries. During each 25-minute block, she focused completely on solving physics problems. During breaks, she allowed herself to check her phone or chat briefly. This structure improved both her concentration and her relationships because her time was clearly divided. Over time, the Pomodoro Technique can help build discipline. At first, you may rely on the timer to stay focused. As the habit grows, you will find it easier to concentrate, even without external reminders. The visible progress of completing session after session also provides motivation. Seeing that you have finished 8 focused blocks in a day gives a clear sense of accomplishment. Consider using a simple notebook or app to track completed sessions. Each time you finish a session, mark it with a check or a tally. Watching the marks accumulate reinforces the feeling that your effort is paying off. This can be especially helpful when working on long-term projects where results are not immediately visible. Imagine a language learner named Ben. His goal is to study vocabulary, grammar, and conversation practice each week. He uses Pomodoro sessions to divide his study time. After a month, he looks back at his notebook and sees that he has completed 40 focused sessions. This record motivates him to keep going and shows him exactly how much work he has invested. The Pomodoro Technique is simple, but its impact can be significant. By breaking work into timed bursts, you make daunting tasks feel manageable. You also train yourself to balance focus and rest, improving both productivity and well-being. Each session becomes a small step forward, and over time, those steps add up to steady, meaningful progress. Imagine sitting down to study with the best intentions. You open your textbook, set out your notes, and begin reading. A few minutes later, your phone buzzes with a notification. You glance at it, planning to respond quickly. But then you see another message and a new post on social media. 10 minutes pass, and you return to your book, only to find you have lost your place and your focus. This cycle repeats throughout the session. By the end of an hour, you have spent more time shifting between tasks than actually learning. Distractions like this are one of the biggest obstacles to effective studying. Modern technology makes it especially difficult to stay focused. Phones, laptops, and tablets are essential tools for studying, but they are also gateways to endless interruptions. Social media, notifications, and background apps compete for attention every few minutes. Even a short distraction breaks concentration, and it can take several minutes to regain the same level of focus. When this happens repeatedly, your study session becomes fragmented and inefficient. To solve this problem, you need to create an environment where distractions are removed or minimized. This often means using tools and strategies that block interruptions before they reach you. There are apps and programs designed specifically to help with this. For example, website blockers can prevent access to social media or other time-wasting sites while you study. You set a list of sites to block and a time limit, and the program enforces it. During that time, even if you feel tempted to check a site, you cannot. This creates a clear boundary between study time and leisure time. Imagine a student named Sarah who struggles with checking her phone during study sessions. She tells herself she will just take a quick look at a message, but she ends up scrolling for half an hour. To fix this, she installs a website blocker on her laptop and a focus app on her phone. She sets both to activate automatically during her planned study hours. At first, she feels restless without the constant stream of notifications. After a few days, she notices she can study for much longer without losing her train of thought. The blockers remove the decision-making process. Instead of relying on willpower, Sarah has created a system that makes distraction impossible. Notifications are another source of constant interruption. Many apps send alerts for every small update, from new messages to minor changes in settings. These alerts trigger a reflexive response to check your device. Turning off unnecessary notifications is a simple but powerful step. You can keep essential notifications, like calls from family members or reminders for important deadlines, while silencing everything else. Some focus apps even allow you to create custom profiles so only certain alerts come through while you study. Consider a student named Alex preparing for a final exam. He keeps his phone nearby in case of emergencies, but every few minutes it buzzes with group chat messages, app updates, and news alerts. The constant interruptions make it impossible for him to stay in deep focus. He decides to customize his notification settings. Now, only calls and calendar reminders come through during study sessions. The difference is dramatic. Without constant buzzing, Alex feels calmer and more focused. When he does take a break, he checks his messages on his own schedule rather than being pulled away at random. Laptops and computers can be just as distracting as phones. A student might open a browser to look at the study question and end up checking email or browsing unrelated sites. To prevent this, many students use browser extensions that block certain websites or limit the amount of time you can spend on them each day. These tools allow you to stay online for research while protecting you from unproductive detours. Imagine Mia, who often gets sidetracked while studying online. She opens her laptop to watch a science video for class, but before she knows it, she is on social media, then checking shopping sites, then reading unrelated articles. She loses 45 minutes without noticing. To fix this, Mia installs a browser extension that blocks social media, shopping, and entertainment sites during study hours. When she tries to visit one of these sites, she sees a message reminding her to stay on task. At first, it feels restrictive, but soon she realizes how much time she saves. Her study sessions become shorter and more productive because she spends every minute on her actual work. The physical environment matters too. Even with apps and blockers, external distractions can break focus. Background noise, conversations, and visual clutter make it harder to concentrate. Creating a dedicated study space helps. This could be a quiet corner of your home, a library, or even a coffee shop with minimal distractions. The key is consistency. When you use the same space for studying, your brain begins to associate that location with focus. Imagine David, who tries to study at the kitchen table while his family watches television in the same room. The noise and movement make it hard for him to concentrate. He decides to set up a small desk in his bedroom with only the essentials: his laptop, textbooks, and a notebook. He tells his family that when he is at the desk, he is in study mode and should not be interrupted unless necessary. Over time, David finds it easier to focus as soon as he sits down because the environment signals that it is time to work. Another strategy is to schedule your study sessions and communicate your plan to others. If friends or family know when you are studying, they are less likely to interrupt you. This external accountability reinforces your boundaries. For example, you might tell a roommate, "I'll be studying from 6 to 8 tonight. Please keep the volume down during that time." Small agreements like this can prevent unnecessary distractions. Some students struggle with internal distractions, like daydreaming or worrying about unrelated tasks. For these, it helps to keep a notepad nearby. When a distracting thought pops into your head, write it down quickly and return to your work. Later, during a break, you can review the list and address the items if needed. This simple practice clears mental clutter without breaking focus. Imagine Laura, who often thinks about errands, emails, and upcoming events while studying. She finds herself stopping mid-session to handle these tasks. To fix this, she keeps a small notebook on her desk. When a thought arises, she writes it down and continues studying. Knowing she will return to the list later helps her stay focused on the present task. Using blockers and apps works best when combined with self-awareness. The tools can remove external temptations, but you must also pay attention to your habits. If you notice a pattern, like always checking your phone during a difficult assignment, you can plan around it. For instance, you might schedule extra short breaks to release tension or use a timer to stay accountable. Imagine Ben, who struggles to stay focused during reading assignments. He realizes he checks his phone every time he feels bored or confused. To counter this, he uses a focus app that locks his phone for 30-minute intervals. He also sets a timer to remind him to take a 5-minute break after each block of work. By combining tools with a clear plan, Ben gradually trains himself to study with fewer interruptions. Eliminating distractions is not about willpower alone. It is about designing your environment and using technology to protect your attention. When you block social media, silence notifications, and create a dedicated space, you remove the constant pull of interruptions. This allows you to dive deeper into your work, stay focused for longer, and make every study session count. Over time, this habit builds a sense of control and clarity that extends beyond studying into every area of life. Imagine sitting down to study in a noisy living room. The television is playing in the background, people are talking, and there is clutter on the table where you are trying to work. You keep shifting in your chair, adjusting your book, and glancing up every time someone walks past. After an hour, you have read a few pages, but you cannot remember much of what you studied. This happens because the environment around you has a direct effect on how well you focus and retain information. The brain responds to cues in the surroundings, And when those cues signal distraction or stress, learning becomes harder. Choosing an optimal environment can make the difference between a productive study session and wasted time. A well-lit space is essential. Dim lighting strains the eyes and makes you feel tired more quickly. Bright, natural light helps you stay alert and focused. If you can, study near a window where sunlight comes in, but make sure the glare does not hit your screen or notes. When natural light is not available, use a desk lamp with a steady, warm light that mimics daylight. Imagine reading late at night under a weak bulb that casts shadows across the page. You squint, shift your position, and lose focus. In contrast, a bright, even light keeps your mind engaged and reduces fatigue. Noise is another factor that influences concentration. Some people believe they can study while listening to conversations or television, but divided attention leads to shallow learning. The brain has to process background noise at the same time as the study material, which slows comprehension. A quiet space removes this extra burden. Libraries are ideal because they are designed for silence and focus. If you cannot access a library, try to find a room in your home where you can close the door and block out sounds. If total silence feels uncomfortable, soft instrumental music or white noise can provide a steady background without being distracting. Consider a student named Sarah who usually studies at the kitchen table. Her siblings come and go, talking and making noise, and she often ends up joining the conversation. When she moves her study sessions to a quiet corner of the library, she notices an immediate improvement. She reads faster, remembers more, and finishes assignments in less time. The change is not due to effort alone, but to the shift in her environment. The physical layout of the space matters as well. A dedicated study area signals to your brain that it is time to focus. If you always study in bed or on the couch, your body associates those places with rest and relaxation, making it harder to concentrate. A desk or table set aside for study creates a clear boundary between work and leisure. Keep only the materials you need within reach: textbooks, notebooks, pens, and a computer if necessary. Clutter distracts the mind. When you see piles of unrelated items, part of your attention drifts toward them. A clean, organized surface allows you to direct all your mental energy toward learning. Imagine Alex, who tries to study on his bed with his laptop and notes spread around him. After a while, he starts to feel sleepy and unmotivated. He decides to set up a small desk in his room with only his study materials. When he sits at the desk, he feels more alert and focused because the space has one clear purpose. Over time, the act of sitting there becomes a mental trigger that tells his brain it's time to study. Temperature and comfort play subtle but important roles. A room that is too hot or too cold can distract you without you realizing it. If you are shivering or sweating, part of your energy goes toward regulating your body instead of concentrating on the material. Aim for a moderate, comfortable temperature. The same applies to seating. A chair that is supportive but not overly soft keeps you alert. If you sink into a couch or bed, your body relaxes too much and your mind may wander. Digital distractions are a major challenge in modern study environments. Even in a quiet room, the presence of a phone or open browser tabs can derail focus. Before you begin studying, put your phone out of reach or use an app that blocks notifications. Close unnecessary programs on your computer so you are not tempted to switch tasks. Imagine Mia, who sits at her desk ready to review flashcards. Her phone buzzes every few minutes with messages and updates. Each time she looks at it, she loses her train of thought. When she starts leaving her phone in another room, she discovers she can study for longer periods without interruption. Timing also influences the effectiveness of your environment. The best space in the world will not help if you try to study at a time when you are naturally tired or distracted. Pay attention to when you feel most alert during the day. Some people focus best in the morning, while others do better in the afternoon or evening. Align your study sessions with these peak times whenever possible. Combine this with a consistent schedule so that studying becomes a habit linked to both time and place. Imagine David, who always tries to study late at night after work. He struggles to stay awake and rereads the same passages without absorbing them. One weekend, he experiments with studying in the morning before anyone else in the house is awake. He finds he can concentrate better and complete more work in less time. From then on, he schedules his study sessions for early mornings in a quiet, well-lit spot. Personalizing your space can also improve motivation. While it should be free of clutter and distractions, adding a few meaningful items can create a positive atmosphere. A small plant, a motivational quote, or a picture can make the area feel inviting. The goal is to create a balance, a space that is functional and focused, but also comfortable enough that you want to spend time there. Consider Laura, who studies at a plain desk in her bedroom. She finds the space dull and uninspiring. She adds a desk lamp with warm light, a small plant, and a photo of her graduation goal. These small touches make the space feel like her own, encouraging her to sit down and get started each day. If you cannot control every aspect of your environment, focus on what you can change. For example, if noise is unavoidable, use noise-canceling headphones or earplugs. If the lighting is poor, bring a portable lamp. Even small adjustments can improve focus. Imagine Ben, who lives in a crowded apartment. He cannot always find a perfectly quiet spot, so he wears headphones with soft background music and studies at the same time each day. Over time, his brain adapts to this routine, and the noise fades into the background. Studying in an optimal environment is about creating conditions that support focus rather than fight against it. A well-lit, quiet, organized space sends a clear signal to your brain. This is where learning happens. By removing distractions, controlling comfort, and establishing consistency, you make it easier to dive deep into your work. Each time you sit down in that space, you build a habit of concentration, turning study sessions into periods of real progress rather than scattered effort. Imagine looking back after a semester and realizing that the simple act of choosing the right environment saved you countless hours of wasted time. You covered more material, understood it better, and felt less stressed along the way. The surroundings shaped your behavior and made studying a natural, focused process. This is the quiet power of an optimal study space, built through small, deliberate choices that set you up for success every time you sit down to learn. Imagine sitting down to study with a heavy mind. Thoughts from the day run through your head. A conversation you had earlier, a list of chores waiting to be done, a message you need to respond to. You open your textbook, but part of your attention stays with those thoughts. You read the same sentence several times and still cannot recall what it said. This happens because the brain cannot focus deeply when it is cluttered with distractions and stress. Practicing mindfulness before studying can clear that mental noise, making it easier to concentrate and retain information. Mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It sounds simple, but it takes effort. Most people spend a lot of time thinking about the past or worrying about the future. These thoughts pull attention away from what is happening right now. When you study, you need your full attention on the material in front of you. A short mindfulness session before you start can help bring your mind into the present and prepare it for focused work. You do not need special equipment or a quiet retreat to practice mindfulness. A few minutes in a calm position is enough. Sit comfortably in a chair or on the floor with your back straight. Close your eyes or lower your gaze. Place your hands on your lap and take a slow breath in through your nose, then let it out gently through your mouth. As you breathe, notice the feeling of air moving in and out. Thoughts will come into your mind, like reminders or worries. Instead of fighting them, acknowledge them and return your focus to your breathing. Imagine a student named Sarah who often feels overwhelmed before exams. When she sits down to study, her mind races with thoughts about whether she will do well or fail. She decides to try a short mindfulness exercise. She sets a timer for 5 minutes, closes her eyes, and breathes slowly. At first, her thoughts jump around, but each time, she brings her attention back to her breath. When the timer goes off, she feels calmer and more grounded. When she begins studying, she notices she can focus more deeply and for longer periods. Mindfulness helps because it reduces stress and anxiety. When you are stressed, your body enters a state of heightened alertness. This response can be useful in emergencies, but during study sessions, it works against you. High stress floods the brain with cortisol, a hormone that interferes with memory and concentration. A few minutes of mindful breathing lowers this stress response, creating a mental environment where learning can happen smoothly. Consider another student, Alex, who struggles with constant distractions. He sits at his desk and tries to focus, but his mind keeps wandering to social media, upcoming plans, and random thoughts. Each time he gets distracted, he feels frustrated, which makes it even harder to concentrate. When Alex adds a short mindfulness practice before studying, he notices a change. By focusing on his breath for 5 minutes, he trains his mind to notice distractions without getting caught up in them. This skill carries over into his study sessions. When his mind drifts, he gently brings it back to the task at hand instead of spiraling into frustration. Mindfulness does not require long sessions to be effective. Even 2 or 3 minutes can make a difference if you practice consistently. The goal is not to stop all thoughts, but to create a habit of noticing them and returning to the present. Over time, this habit strengthens your ability to focus, much like exercise strengthens muscles. Imagine Mia, who has a packed schedule and little time to spare. She studies in short bursts between classes and work shifts. At first, she doubts that mindfulness will help her because she cannot set aside long periods for it. She decides to start small by taking 3 deep breaths before each study session. As she breathes, she focuses only on the sensation of air entering and leaving her body. Even this brief pause helps her shift gears from a busy day into study mode. After a few weeks, she notices that she starts her sessions feeling calmer and more prepared. Some students find it helpful to use guided mindfulness recordings. These recordings lead you through a short meditation, giving instructions on breathing and focus. This can be useful when you are new to the practice or having trouble staying present on your own. Many free resources are available online, ranging from 2-minute exercises to longer sessions. Mindfulness can also be combined with visualization. After a few minutes of breathing, you can picture yourself studying with full focus and confidence. Imagine turning the pages of a book, solving problems, or recalling facts with ease. This mental rehearsal prepares your mind for the work ahead and reinforces a positive attitude. Consider David, who often feels nervous before tackling difficult subjects. After his mindfulness session, he spends a minute visualizing himself calmly working through challenging problems. When he begins studying, he feels more confident because his brain has already practiced the scenario. This makes it easier to stay focused and persistent when the work gets tough. Mindfulness can be practiced in different ways depending on your preferences. Some people prefer to focus entirely on their breath. Others use a simple word or phrase, like focus or calm, repeating it silently each time their mind wanders. You can also pay attention to physical sensations, such as the feeling of your feet on the floor or your hands resting on your lap. The specific focus matters less than the act of returning to the present moment whenever you drift. Imagine Laura, who finds it hard to focus on her breath alone. She decides to concentrate on the sounds around her instead. She sits quietly and listens without labeling the sounds or reacting to them. This practice helps her develop the same skill of attention and awareness, just through a different route. When she finishes, she feels centered and ready to begin studying. Mindfulness before studying works because it creates a clear transition between the chaos of daily life and the focused state needed for learning. Without this transition, you might carry stress, worries, or leftover thoughts into your study session, making it harder to concentrate. By pausing for a few minutes to breathe and center yourself, you send a signal to your brain. Now is the time to focus. Imagine two students preparing for the same exam. One rushes to her desk and starts reading immediately, her mind still full of the day's events. The other spends 5 minutes in mindfulness before opening her books. During the study session, the first student feels scattered and frustrated, while the second works with steady concentration. The difference comes not from intelligence or effort, but from how they prepared their minds. Even outside of studying, regular mindfulness practice can improve overall mental clarity and resilience. When you face setbacks or challenges, the ability to stay present helps you respond calmly rather than react impulsively. This emotional balance supports not only academic performance, but also well-being in daily life. Imagine Ben, who tends to panic during exams. His heart races and his thoughts spiral out of control, making it hard to recall what he studied. After practicing mindfulness for several weeks, he notices a shift. During his next exam, when anxiety rises, he takes a slow breath and grounds himself in the present moment. This simple act steadies his mind and allows him to think clearly. Mindfulness is a skill that grows with practice. At first, you may find it difficult to stay focused for even a minute. With time, it becomes easier to settle your mind and return to the present. Each session, no matter how short, strengthens your ability to concentrate and manage distractions. By making mindfulness part of your study routine, you create a foundation for deep, focused learning and a calm, steady mind that supports your academic goals. Imagine sitting down to study in complete silence. At first, the quiet seems helpful, but soon you start to notice every small sound around you. The hum of the refrigerator, footsteps in the hallway, a car passing outside. Each noise pulls your attention away from your work. Your own thoughts grow louder in the silence, and you find yourself drifting off, thinking about unrelated things. For some learners, silence is not the ideal environment for focus. A low level of background sound, like soft music or white noise, can create a steady backdrop that masks distractions and helps the mind settle into concentration. Background music works by giving your brain something consistent to process, which can prevent it from reacting to every sudden noise. Think of it as a gentle buffer between you and the unpredictable sounds of the environment. The key is to choose the right kind of music. Songs with lyrics can compete with reading and writing tasks because the words interfere with language processing. Instrumental music, such as classical, jazz, or ambient tracks, avoids this problem. The goal is not to entertain, but to create a calm, steady atmosphere that supports focus. Consider a student named Sarah who lives in a noisy apartment. Her roommates often talk in the next room, and the sound distracts her when she studies. She tries wearing noise-canceling headphones, but the silence feels unnatural and makes her restless. Then she experiments with playing quiet instrumental music through her headphones. The music softens the voices in the background and gives her mind a stable rhythm to follow. After a few sessions, she notices that she can read for longer periods without losing focus. White noise works in a similar way. Unlike music, white noise does not have melody or rhythm. It is a constant sound, like the hum of a fan, the rush of water, or static from a radio. Many people use white noise machines or apps to block out disruptive sounds. Because the noise is steady and unchanging, the brain quickly tunes it out. This makes other noises, like a door slamming or someone coughing, less noticeable. White noise can be especially helpful in shared spaces where complete silence is impossible. Imagine Alex, who studies at the library but often gets distracted by other students whispering or typing loudly. He brings a small white noise machine and places it on the table beside him. At first, the sound feels strange, but after a few minutes, it fades into the background. The other noises seem less sharp, and Alex finds himself fully absorbed in his work. When he forgets to bring the machine one day, he notices how much more distracting the environment feels without it. Not everyone responds to background sound in the same way. Some students focus best with silence, while others need a low hum to stay engaged. It may take some experimenting to discover what works for you. Start by trying short sessions with different sounds. You might begin with soft classical music, then switch to white noise, then study in silence. Pay attention to how well you concentrate and how much you remember afterward. Consider Mia, who studies for long hours before her nursing exams. She finds silence makes her anxious because she becomes overly aware of her own thoughts. When she plays ambient electronic music at a low volume, she feels calmer and more focused. However, when she tries upbeat pop songs, she catches herself singing along instead of reading. Through trial and error, Mia learns that slow, repetitive sounds work best for her study sessions. The volume of the sound matters as much as the type. If the music or noise is too loud, it becomes another distraction. The goal is to keep it at a level where it blends into the background rather than demanding attention. A good test is whether you can still hear yourself think clearly. If you find yourself tapping along to the beat or straining to hear your own thoughts, the volume is probably too high. Imagine David, who uses a playlist of piano music while studying. One day, he accidentally turns the volume up too much. Instead of focusing, he keeps noticing changes in the melody and rhythm. When he lowers the volume, the music fades into the background and his focus returns. This simple adjustment makes a big difference in his productivity. Background sound can also serve as a signal to your brain that it is time to study. If you always play the same type of music or white noise when you begin, your brain starts to associate that sound with concentration. Over time, the act of turning on the sound becomes part of your routine, helping you transition into study mode more quickly. Consider Laura, who struggles to get started with her homework each evening. She creates a study ritual. She clears her desk, fills a water bottle, and turns on a specific playlist of soft instrumental tracks. After a few weeks, the music becomes a cue that tells her brain it's time to focus. Even on days when she feels unmotivated, the familiar sound helps her settle into her work. For some tasks, different types of sound may be helpful. Reading dense material or writing essays often requires calm, steady music or white noise. Repetitive tasks like organizing flashcards or reviewing basic facts may work well with slightly more upbeat rhythms. Matching the sound to the type of work can enhance focus without becoming distracting. Imagine Ben, who is studying for a language exam. When he practices speaking and listening, he turns off the music so he can concentrate fully on pronunciation and comprehension. When he switches to organizing his vocabulary flashcards, he plays soft background music to keep his energy up. By adjusting the sound to fit the task, Ben makes each session more effective. If you share a study space with others, background sound can create a shared atmosphere of focus. In a busy house or dorm, one person playing calm music softly can help signal to everyone that it is time to work. However, it is important to respect others' preferences. Using headphones is often the best solution when studying around people who need silence. Consider two roommates, Sarah and Alex, who have very different study habits. Sarah focuses best with quiet music, while Alex prefers total silence. At first, they argue about noise levels. Then Sarah starts using headphones, while Alex uses earplugs to block any remaining sound. This compromise allows both to create their own optimal environments without conflict. There are many tools available for finding background sounds that suit your needs. Music streaming services offer playlists specifically designed for studying or concentration. White noise apps let you choose from a variety of sounds, such as rain, ocean waves, or steady static. Some students even create custom mixes of different sounds to match their preferences. Imagine Leah, who experiments with different apps and discovers she works best with a combination of soft rain sounds and gentle instrumental music. She sets up a playlist that blends the two, creating a unique background that keeps her calm and focused. Each time she studies, she plays the same mix, reinforcing her routine and improving her concentration. The key to using background sound effectively is balance. The sound should support focus, not compete with it. By choosing the right type, volume, and timing, you can create an environment that blocks distractions and helps your mind stay engaged. Whether it is the steady rush of white noise or the quiet flow of instrumental music, the right sound can turn a chaotic space into a focused study zone. Over time, you may find that background sound becomes an essential part of your study habits. When used thoughtfully, it can help you maintain steady attention, reduce stress, and make studying a more pleasant and productive experience. The steady presence of sound creates a kind of mental shelter, protecting your focus from the disruptions of the outside world and giving you the clarity you need to learn effectively. Imagine sitting down to study a thick textbook filled with complicated terms, long explanations, and dense diagrams. You start reading, but after a few pages, you feel overwhelmed. The information blends together, and you cannot remember much of what you just read. This happens because the brain can only handle a limited amount of information at once. When too much material is presented in one large block, it becomes difficult to process and store it in memory. Chunking is a strategy that helps solve this problem by breaking complex material into smaller, meaningful units that are easier to understand and recall. Chunking works because the brain naturally looks for patterns and connections. When you group related pieces of information together, they form a single unit, or chunk, in your mind. This reduces the load on working memory. Instead of trying to remember many separate details, you only need to remember a few well-organized chunks. For example, it is easier to remember a phone number as 3 groups of numbers, like 555-123-7890, than as a string of 10 separate digits. The same principle applies to studying. Consider a student named Sarah learning the periodic table of elements. If she tries to memorize every element one by one, the task feels impossible. Instead, she groups them by categories, such as metals, nonmetals, and noble gases. Within each group, she creates smaller chunks, like the first 5 elements or a set of similar properties. Over time, these chunks form a mental map that is much easier to recall than a random list of symbols and numbers. Chunking also helps with understanding, not just memorization. When you break material into logical sections, you can focus on one idea at a time and see how it connects to the bigger picture. Imagine reading a chapter about the human circulatory system. Instead of trying to learn everything at once, you might first focus on the heart and how it pumps blood. Then you study the veins and arteries. Finally, you look at how oxygen and nutrients are transported throughout the body. By mastering each chunk separately, you build a clear, layered understanding of the whole system. Alex, a history student, faces a different challenge. He needs to learn the causes and events of the American Revolution. The material includes dates, names, battles, and political ideas. At first, it feels like too much to manage. He decides to chunk the material into 3 main categories: causes of the war, major battles, and key figures. Within causes, he makes smaller chunks like taxes, colonial laws, and public protests. When studying, he focuses on one chunk at a time. By exam day, he can recall the information easily because his mind sees it as a structured network instead of scattered facts. Chunking can also be applied to problem-solving subjects like math or physics. Many students struggle because they treat each problem as completely new. In reality, most problems share common patterns. When you recognize these patterns and group them into chunks, solving becomes faster and more accurate. Imagine Mia learning algebra. At first, she sees each equation as unique and confusing. Her teacher helps her identify types of problems, such as linear equations, quadratic equations, and systems of equations. Each type becomes a chunk with its own steps and strategies. When Mia encounters a new problem, she first decides which chunk it belongs to, then applies the correct steps. This approach reduces stress and speeds up her progress. Chunking is useful for studying languages as well. Learning individual words without context can be frustrating and slow. Grouping words into meaningful phrases or themes makes them easier to remember. For example, instead of memorizing 10 unrelated words in Spanish, you might focus on a set related to ordering food at a restaurant. You learn them together in a meaningful context, which strengthens recall. David, a language learner, practices this by creating themed flashcards. One set might cover greetings and introductions, another might cover travel phrases, and another might focus on family vocabulary. When he studies, he reviews each chunk as a unit. Later, when speaking, he can pull out entire phrases instead of struggling to assemble words one by one. The process of chunking starts with identifying natural groupings in the material. Sometimes these are obvious, like chapters in a textbook or categories in a chart. Other times, you must create the groupings yourself. Look for patterns, similarities, or logical steps. If you are studying a process, break it down into stages. If you are memorizing facts, group them by theme or relationship. Consider Laura, who is preparing for a biology exam on cell division. The topic includes many steps, like prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. At first, the terms seem random. Laura chunks the process by creating a simple story that links each step in her story. Chromosomes prepare for a journey, line up, separate, and finally settle into new cells. This narrative gives meaning to the terms, turning a list of steps into a single, memorable chunk. Chunking also helps with time management. When you break a large task into chunks, it becomes less overwhelming. Instead of saying, "I need to study the entire textbook," you focus on one section at a time. Each chunk becomes a clear, manageable goal. Completing one chunk gives you a sense of progress and motivates you to continue. Ben, a medical student, faces hundreds of pages of material each week. If he thinks about it all at once, he feels paralyzed. To cope, he divides his workload into daily chunks. On Monday, he covers anatomy. On Tuesday, he reviews physiology. Each day, he focuses only on that chunk. By the end of the week, he has covered everything without burning out. Technology can support chunking. Many study apps allow you to create digital flashcards or mind maps that visually organize information into chunks. For example, a mind map might start with a central topic, like World War II, and branch into chunks such as causes, major events, and aftermath. Each branch can then break down further into smaller details. Seeing the structure visually reinforces the relationships between ideas. Chunking works best when you review the chunks regularly. At first, you might need to revisit each chunk often to keep it fresh. Over time, as the chunks become part of your long-term memory, you can review less frequently. This approach prevents forgetting and strengthens connections between chunks. Imagine Sarah returning to her periodic table study. In the first week, she reviews her groups of elements every day. By the second week, she reviews every other day. By the third week, she reviews once before the test. The chunks stay strong because she built them gradually and reinforced them over time. One challenge of chunking is knowing how small or large a chunk should be. If a chunk is too big, it overwhelms you again. If it is too small, you end up with too many pieces to manage. A good rule is to keep each chunk simple enough to recall easily, but meaningful enough to stand on its own. For instance, Laura's story about cell division is one chunk. But each stage could also be its own smaller chunk if she needed to study it in detail. The flexibility of chunking allows you to adjust based on the complexity of the material and your personal learning style. Over time, chunking becomes a natural habit. The more you practice grouping information, the faster your brain gets at finding patterns. This skill helps not only with studying, but also with thinking and problem-solving in everyday life. You begin to see connections between ideas and to organize your thoughts clearly. When faced with complex material, chunking turns a mountain of information into a series of manageable steps. Each chunk builds on the last, creating a strong foundation of understanding. Instead of feeling lost and overwhelmed, you move through the material with clarity and confidence, one meaningful unit at a time.